calculate that her life is now a high-stakes game, with her safety and future hanging by a thread. Every move pulls her deeper into a world of secrets, power, and wrath, where love has a razor's edge and vengeance feels inevitable. The little girl was moving around on her lap, making it difficult to put her hair up in the French braid she loved. She had never seen a 5-year-old with so much hair. "Crystal Ann, stop this right now or we will be late for church. What is going on with you?" "Granny, Cousin Billy said you were a Yankee. Is that true?" "First of all, young lady, it's were, not was. Here comes Gramps. Why don't you ask him?" Gwen noticed someone standing in the doorway of her office with a strange look on her face. The woman was her husband's oldest friend, who had moved from Birmingham to Boston with him. Gwen never really liked her. Her name was Crystal Ann Montgomery, but everyone called her Dixie. She was short with a curvy figure, a redhead with green eyes. With her good looks and soft Southern accent, she had all the men at the office under her spell, even the married ones. All she had to do was suggest something, and it became the rule. She flirted a lot, but never crossed the line. She never dated anyone at the office, but was often seen with various eligible men. Strangely, she had never settled down. "Is there something I can help you with, Crystal Ann?" Gwen would never call her by her nickname. "I've been hearing things, bad things. I thought I should come by and see if it's true." Her green eyes were cold and unfriendly. Gwen felt anger rising. "What you hear is none of my concern. I'm sure you have better things to do." Crystal did not react to Gwen's tone. "Sorry, but when you married Hardy, you became my concern. Honestly, I've never liked you and don't care what happens to you. I tried to talk him out of marrying you, but love can be blind. And now you've hurt him, so I'm giving you a warning." She paused to gather her thoughts. "He's not the person you think he is. You know very little about him. He didn't tell you because he was embarrassed and worried you'd leave if you knew the truth. I'm telling you this for his sake, not yours. He follows the rule of an eye for an eye. When he finds out what you've done, you better stay away from him, or it could go badly for you. Just so you know, I'm not saying this to protect you, but him." Now Gwen was furious. First, she thought Crystal was wrong, and secondly, her life was none of her business. With a sarcastic tone, Gwen replied, "Well, Miss Montgomery, thank you for your concern, even if it seems scarce. But Hardy and I are doing just fine, despite what you hear. Now, I'm sure you have work to do." If she thought that would make Crystal leave, she was mistaken. "Oh, don't worry about me. I'm on my lunch break. If everything is fine with your husband, why did Alan post blonde on blonde is back on his work Facebook page? I'm leaving now, but I wanted to talk to you to see if I could help Hardy avoid some pain. But you're either not seeing the truth or just don't care. I've said what I needed to say, but I'll leave you with this. I did this for Hardy, not for you. Remember, he's not one of those fancy boys you know. He won't sit around talking about feelings. He reacts quickly. One last thing. What you might not know is that Hardy really hates cheaters. And when he finds out, I'll be there to support him. I've loved him since I was 14 and I'd never betray him. I will be by his side before you even realize it. Have a nice day, dear." With that, she walked out of the door, turning every man's head in the hallway. Gwen sat in shock before checking his Facebook account. There it was for everyone to see. "Man, the trip to Paris went really well. The meetings were great, and more importantly, Blonde on Blonde is back. Things can't get much better." Blonde on Blonde was his cute name for them when they were close. He liked to think of himself as a rebel and grew his hair out to match hers, saying they made a lovely couple. Her dad and many of the older staff thought he looked too feminine, but he was great at his job, so they left him alone. She grabbed her phone and called his extension. He recognized her number. "Hi, babe. What's going on?" "Alan, are you out of your mind? What's with the blonde on blonde post on Facebook? Are you trying to get me divorced or both of us fired? If my dad sees this, you'll be out of a job right away and I could be in trouble too." By the end, she was almost yelling. "Hold on there. Your dad would never fire you. You're the second best contract lawyer he has, right behind me. Everything will be fine. Just stay calm." Not feeling reassured, she tried to explain. "Look, Paris was a mistake. If I hadn't been drinking and let you talk me into that, it would never have happened. We do not want my husband to find out." Alan wasn't worried. He wanted everyone to know because he wanted Gwen back. He thought he almost had her until her dad brought in that country guy from Alabama. "You didn't think it was a mistake when you were calling my name. Joe doesn't scare me. Remember, I'm a black belt. I won't go looking for him, but if he comes after me, he'll regret it." "Alan, have you lost your mind? Don't underestimate him. He served in Iraq and is used to fighting. Now keep quiet, all right?" He didn't really want to stay quiet, but he decided it was best to keep her calm, so he agreed. Once the call ended, he leaned back in his chair with a smile. He had almost won her over before, and this time he was determined to succeed. He knew her weaknesses and planned to use them to his advantage. She was beautiful and smart, but more importantly, she was the only child and heir to her father's estate when he was gone. Plus, she had a huge trust fund from her grandmother, worth several $100 million. Yes, soon, life was going to treat him very well. With a grin, he picked up the phone. Gwen sat at her desk, frustrated. How had she gotten herself into this situation? She hoped Alan would keep his promise. Gazing at the photo on her desk, she remembered how she had pursued him. She had chased him without giving up. His southern charm and good looks attracted every woman around him. He didn't seem to notice and treated everyone kindly. But when he looked at them, it felt as if they were the only woman in the world to him. It made them feel excited and nervous. One person described his gaze as calm, but with something wild just beneath the surface. "Who is that?" she asked her paralegal one day as she watched him walk by. Lisa laughed. "Easy there. That's Hardy Wilkes, the new lawyer your dad brought in from the Birmingham office. He handles all the pro bono work now. He's handsome, but kind of a lone wolf. I don't think he's interested in women. I tried to flirt, but he didn't seem to notice." Gwen mentioned him at her regular Sunday lunch with her dad. "I hear you brought a lawyer up from Alabama. Is he any good?" She often wondered why her dad kept the Birmingham office running. Her great-grandfather had established it to help a steel magnate he represented, and it had turned into a good decision with many clients over time. But now the steel industry was fading away. The office remained for the few old clients left, yet it was still profitable and had a special place in her dad's heart. Her dad chuckled. "Leave it to you to notice when a handsome man joins the firm. His name is Hardy Wilkes. He grew up near Birmingham and went to college with help from the GI Bill. We even fund a scholarship at his college, and that's where I met him. He may seem like a friendly guy, but he's very sharp. I saw him impress a practicing lawyer during a mock trial in his second year. I recruited him right then. Once he got his license, he came to work for me. He doesn't seem to be driven by money, so I let him lead the free legal services section in Birmingham. He was careful about the cases he took, only choosing those he believed involved innocent people, and he had a success rate of 93%. He looked at her thoughtfully. She often found herself falling in love at the wrong times. She had been engaged twice, and both times it ended badly when she strayed. "Leave him alone, Gwen. You have no idea how he thinks. He doesn't understand your world, and I'm not sure he would fit in. Plus, I doubt you could keep him in check, and I know that matters to you." "Dad, do you really think I go after every man I find attractive?" He just leaned back and smiled. It was a tough challenge. He was polite and kind, but he simply wasn't interested. She was spoiled enough to feel quite offended by this. Finally, she found a way to bring him along. It was a formal dinner for Amnesty International, a charity event organized by her father. He supported the group both privately and publicly, giving money and resources. He was supposed to speak at the event, but a bad flu had landed him in the hospital overnight. Though he was home now, he wasn't well enough to attend, so he asked Hardy to give his speech as a personal favor. He would represent the firm, while she would represent the family. She arrived in a limo to pick him up. Gwen spent a lot of time and money making herself look perfect. She wore a long, elegant gray dress from a well-known designer, along with diamonds and bracelets. Her long, golden hair was styled perfectly. She took his breath away. He wore a classic black tuxedo, and she thought he looked handsome in it. His almost platinum blonde hair was nicely styled, and his striking gray eyes and bright smile made him very appealing. The local press was out in full force. This was a big event, and many important people were attending. When they arrived as hosts and main donors, they found themselves photographed nearly the entire time. They appeared on the front page, in both the business and social sections of the Sunday paper. The front page introduced them as Gwen Canaday, a contract law expert and daughter of the principal partner and CEO of Canaday and Associates, and Hardy Wilkes, a well-known defense attorney from Birmingham associated with the same firm. The business section featured an article on the economics of free legal services provided by large firms, while the social page speculated whether they were a couple and if the Canaday wild child was finally settling down. The night was a success, raising money and committing hours to free legal services by different firms. Hardy gave an inspiring speech about the importance of the cause. They mingled, with her holding onto his arm for comfort, saying it would keep trouble away. She was careful to behave well, but sometimes playful, with light touches and soft words. By the end of the night, she was more sober than usual, while he had enjoyed more wine than he usually did. The ride home was easy. She sat close, but didn't want to overwhelm him. She felt he might pull away if she got too close. Instead of dropping her off at her townhouse, he took her to her father's grand house. To her surprise, he agreed to have coffee before leaving. They talked for 45 minutes, shared a gentle kiss, and then he was gone. As he walked away, she hugged herself behind the door. It felt good to have that feeling again. After that, she checked on her father before heading to her old room. Her last thoughts before sleeping were of his smile. After that night, she found many reasons for him to join her at events. "Just business, you know," she would say. Soon they were officially dating. The courtship was tricky since she had to take the lead. He was very interested in her, but wouldn't make any moves. The first thing she did was end her relationship with Alan. He was smart and fun, and their time together had some exciting moments. They sometimes used things he called recreational substances, which made her uneasy afterward. More importantly, she didn't feel love for him. Alan didn't react well at first, but later came to terms with it and wished her well, saying he would be there for her if she needed someone. Her dad gave her a serious talk after he learned of her intentions. "Leave him alone, honey. He's a good man, and you could hurt him without even trying. He comes from a different background. His values and future plans might not match yours. You'll end up breaking his heart." "Oh, Daddy, don't worry. It's nothing serious. I won't hurt him. He probably won't remember me in 2 years. I like him. He's fun," she replied. At home, she thought about whether the name Gwen Canaday Wilkes would sound as nice to others as it did to her. As they grew more comfortable, he often explained why a long-term relationship wouldn't work. "I'm almost 10 years older than you. I rely on the good salary your dad gives me. I can't keep up with your world and don't really want to. I'm a simple guy. You seem much more complicated. I just want a peaceful life with a good woman and a few kids. I don't think you want that." She felt insulted and showed him a glimpse of her fierce side. "How would you know what I want? You've never asked. Maybe I want the same things. Maybe having money and power isn't as satisfying as the love of a good man. You'll never find out unless you give me a chance." "Sure, I like money and I'm used to it, but when I think of a man, that's not what matters to me. I have more money now than most people could earn in a lifetime, and that's not even counting what I'll inherit from my dad. But what I really want isn't about the money. It's about love." She took a deep breath and gently teased him. "Sorry, darling, but sometimes you can be a bit clueless. Are you sure you're really a lawyer? I hope your kisses are better than your arguments." So far, on their 6th date, all she had received was a soft goodnight kiss. She felt both emotionally and physically frustrated. Normally, it only took her 2 dates to get closer to a guy if she wanted. It seemed she had made an impression on him. She had never seen his eyes so focused. He looked intense. He held her firmly and kissed her with a lot of passion. At first, she was taken by surprise, but soon she got lost in the moment. She felt a mix of emotions, joy, desire, and love all at once. When their kiss finally ended, the only sound in the room was their heavy breathing. Suddenly, he stood up, quickly said goodnight, and walked out of her townhouse. By the time she collected herself and rushed to the door, he was already gone. She leaned against the doorframe and smiled. "Gotcha." Her father was not pleased at all. "Do not do this, Gwen. It will only lead to trouble. Please, Dad, be happy for me. I truly love him. Just think, In a few years, I'll give you the grandkids you've always wanted. Did you know he asked me for your hand? Who does that anymore? He's the best man I've ever met, Gwen. Seriously, he has a lot of potential. If you have even a little doubt, you should let him go. I'll hold on to him until the day I die. I promise you, Dad. She finally won him over on their 9th date. They were at an art benefit. To her surprise, he knew a lot about art. He admired Impressionists and old masters, but wasn't too fond of Surrealists and modern art. Pollock? Really? The man just threw paint on canvases. Even a monkey could do that. She loved The Scream for what she called its raw emotion, but she also enjoyed folk art and the works of the Wyeth family. Their playful argument attracted a small crowd, and soon several others joined in. One woman seemed much too friendly, and Gwen found herself unexpectedly defending her space. She tried to position herself between Hardy and the woman, but failed a few times. The woman was stunning, even if she was a bit older, and her fancy clothes and attitude were clear signs of wealth. Hardy noticed and playfully gave the woman more attention than Gwen liked. She confronted the woman in the restroom. "That Hardy is quite a handsome man. I'd love to see more of him." The other ladies chuckled, and one even joked that she heard his briefs were anything but brief. Gwen had finally reached her limit. "Please, back off. He's mine." She smiled sweetly, which only made her more upset. "You don't need to try to convince me, dear. You need to convince him." She stayed close to him for the rest of the night. "Why did you do that?" They were in the car, driving home. "Do what?" "You know what I mean. Flirt with that woman. Couldn't she tell you were with me? She seems too old for you anyway. I mean, she's like, what, in her 40s? That wasn't kind." "That woman, as you call her, is one of our clients. She has money from Birmingham. I helped her nephew with a small issue a few years ago. She was just teasing you to see your reaction. And she's 39, just a few years older than me. Besides," he grinned, "who says I belong to you?" This surprised her. "Well, I mean, honey, stick to contract law. You wouldn't stand a chance against me in a debate." She could see he was amused. She playfully hit his shoulder. "I'm starting to see how clever you are, and just so you know, you're mine because I say so, because that's what I want." She could feel him watching her in the dark. "Be careful what you wish for, little girl. It might turn out differently than you expect." She replied with determination. "I always get what I want, and if it's not exactly what I thought, I can adjust and make it better." His mood changed suddenly. He was smiling again. "Why, counselor, that sounds like a business proposal. Are you ready to discuss terms?" She smiled back. "Yes, I am. I can bring a very good offer to the table." They had arrived at her townhouse. As he got out to walk her to the door, she told the driver to leave. "Well," he said, watching the car drive away, "there goes my ride home. Don't worry, my dear, I'll get you home." As she turned to unlock her door, she whispered, "Eventually." She made a pot of coffee, which he loved. He was a coffee enthusiast, always trying different kinds. He had developed a taste for it during his time in Iraq, laughing that many returned with bad habits, but he was addicted to caffeine. She always kept some unique blends available. Excusing herself, she put on a short robe over her dress. When she came back, his eyes went straight to her legs. Knowing she had nice legs, she playfully moved around a bit before tucking them under her on the couch. He had prepared the coffee, and they sat together, enjoying the silence. "I think you owe me something for being mean to me tonight." He was surprised, pulled from his thoughts by her sudden words. "What do you think would be fair?" She moved closer, sitting right in front of him. "I think 10 kisses would be a good start. After that, we can talk." The first 2 kisses were soft and gentle, the next 2 a bit more insistent. She stepped back and took a breath. "I've never felt so warm during a discussion. I need to get a bit more comfortable." She let her robe fall open. He looked surprised, and then his expression changed as he looked at her with interest. As his hands began to explore, she let out a soft sigh. "This feels much better." After a few kisses, the robe was on the floor. He kissed her neck softly, going lower. She could sense his excitement. She leaned closer to him. "I think," she said, breathing a little heavily. "I think." Before she could finish, he kissed her again. He easily lifted her up and carried her into the bedroom. He set her down gently and she watched him as he took off his clothes. When he was done, she had a nice surprise. While his size wasn't the largest she had ever seen, it was quite impressive. She reached out, wanting to get closer, but he gently pushed her back and moved in closer to her. She let out a joyful gasp. There was no softness, just a steady movement that built in speed and strength. She felt a wave of pleasure wash over her before he slowed down. They were both breathing heavily. Finally, she managed to speak. "Wow, that was amazing, I can't believe." But before she could say more, he turned her around and gently guided her to change position. There's no way he could be ready again, she thought, surprised. Her thoughts disappeared as he began to move again, just as strong as before. Time seemed to disappear, and within moments she felt another burst of joy. He changed his rhythm, moving her effortlessly, which made her plead for more. He kept her on the edge for a few moments longer before taking her over the top again. Just when she felt like she might lose herself, she came back to reality as the excitement washed over her once more. When he finally wrapped his arms around her, she drifted off to sleep. The next morning she was still resting when she felt some drops of water on her face. Opening her eyes, she saw him freshly showered, wrapped in a towel, shaking water from his body. "Good morning. Do you happen to have a razor lying around?" "If I kissed you now, it would feel like sandpaper," he joked, rubbing his cheek. She moved across the bed with a playful grin. "And do you plan to kiss me?" He smiled warmly. "Maybe more than once, but let's keep it smooth." Laughing, she handed him a razor. "Hope you don't mind the color, it's pink." He chuckled, taking it from her. "Our little secret." "Let me know if there's anything you'd like for next time," she teased, meeting his gaze. "Are you sure there's going to be a next time?" he asked, a little more seriously. "Oh, definitely. More than one." It was exactly what he wanted to hear. As he shaved, she stepped into the shower and called, "Could you help me with my back?" He joined her, and they shared a laugh, letting the water flow around them. Later, they returned to the bed, still caught in the moment, sharing quiet laughter and warmth. They spent the morning together, talking, resting, and enjoying each other's company. Finally, he sat up. "How about another shower?" he suggested, a playful glint in his eye. She shook her head with a tired smile. "Maybe later. For now, I just need to catch my breath." Watching him walk away, she couldn't help but think how different this felt. Usually it was her leaving others amazed, but today was something else entirely. Where does he find that kind of energy? To be honest, Hardy was shaking a bit as he stepped into the shower. He thought about his grandfather's words from long ago. "The first time you are with a woman, do your best to make it a strong and exciting experience. That way she will know you are sincere. Be gentle later, and she will see you are a good person." Looking back, he knew it was probably the best advice he could have received. Things were not perfect later, but she gradually showed him her viewpoint. To get him to think about marriage, she suggested they live together for a while. They both understood they were good together in many ways, but their backgrounds were different. "I grew up with very little, Gwen. I have never wanted much except to give my family a good life. I don't have your ambition or social skills to fit into your world." "Oh, come on. Everyone can learn. And stop worrying about money. I've told you I have enough for both of us." "That's the thing, my dear. It's your money, not ours. It will always be yours. If we get married, I want a contract that makes it clear I won't take anything if we split up. We'll only share what we earn together after we marry. This is non-negotiable." Her father appreciated the gesture, but it was what he expected from Hardy. He shocked them both when he offered to help Hardy with the contract talks with no arguments. He insisted that Gwen hire another lawyer outside of his firm. The meeting was unexpected for everyone. Her father had terms that could not be changed, or the marriage would not happen. If they ever divorced because they could not get along, each would keep what they brought into the marriage. If it was due to Hardy being unfaithful, he would lose everything. Then it got complicated. Because of the large difference in their wealth, if Gwen were unfaithful before 5 years were up, Hardy would receive $40 million, which was a quarter of her trust fund from her grandmother. For each year they stayed married, that amount would drop by $1 million, until he would only get $1 million if they were still married at the end of that time. Her father was in charge of her trust fund until she turned 35, and as her lawyer, he would manage the payments. It would be given right away if there was proof of unfaithfulness, whether they were still married or not. Everyone was taken aback. Gwen's lawyer was almost shouting in protest, as was Hardy. Gwen just sat in shock. Hardy was angry. "I can't accept this. Why won't you respect what I want?" "Hardy, would you marry her without my approval?" He knew he couldn't do that. "No, sir. I could not in good faith go against that." "Then this is what it will take to get my blessing. If you truly plan to be together for the long haul, this is really a small point. Just sign the papers and set the date. Do it to make me happy." He looked at Gwen. Only she could see his true feelings. "He thinks I'm going to be unfaithful," she thought. "I hope he sees how wrong he is." She gave her dad her brightest smile. "I think this whole thing is silly. I never wanted a prenup anyway. Where should I sign?" Despite her lawyer's strong advice, the agreement was signed and filed. The wedding was the biggest event of the season. Officially Catholic, the ceremony took place in the largest church in town. Many people came, mostly friends and supporters from work and politics. Only his grandfather and aunt were there from his family. His parents had passed away and he never talked about siblings. The ceremony, the dress, the celebration were all stunning and very costly. Hardy joked with Greg, her dad, about it, but he just laughed and said it would all be worth it if he never had to do it again. The only problem with the marriage was her mother's involvement. She had called to congratulate her on the engagement. She was living in France with her 6th husband. "I'm so happy for you, darling. Is he from a good family?" "He's from Alabama, Mom." "Great. Does his family have money?" "No, Mom, She interrupted. "Let me guess. Is it from cotton or shrimp?" "No, Mom, he doesn't have money." Her excitement faded right away. "Oh, no. He's not trying to take advantage of you, is he?" "No, Mom, he wanted to sign a prenup to make sure he would never touch my money." "I always knew you were smart. You must have him well trained." "Not really, but I have gotten him to stop making messes on the carpet." "What?" "Just kidding, Mom. Are you and Henry coming?" "I wish I could, honey, but Henry keeps me on a tight leash, and you know how much he dislikes your father." "Why would he dislike Dad? That was long ago." "I don't know. Maybe because your dad is successful, or perhaps because I once mentioned he was the best partner I ever had when I had too much to drink. I wish I could come, but I can't afford it right now." She understood what her mother was really asking. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll arrange a first-class ticket and a room at that fancy hotel you love. You can use the amenities and just charge the bill to the room. We can go shopping when you get here." "Thank you, my darling. I'll see you soon." She loved her mother, but she had not been a great parent. After they separated, her mother got custody. She quickly took Gwen out of school and traveled around Europe, promising Greg she would hire top-notch tutors. They spent 10 months exploring, but she never opened a single textbook. Eventually, she spent the settlement she received, which was generous despite the prenup, and then tried to use Gwen to get more. Her dad fought hard and successfully won custody. Gwen spent her teenage years learning a lot and started college at just 16. She became the youngest lawyer at her father's firm. Her mom went through relationships and money quickly until she met Henri. He cared for her but wasn't naive. She received a monthly allowance, and when it ran out, there was no more until the next month. Gwen used to help her mom financially until her dad found out. He was very upset and threatened to fire Gwen and stop her trust fund. After that, she had to manage on her own. Gwen needed approval to pay for her trip. She loved her mom, but found that she could only handle her in small amounts. They had some enjoyable shopping trips together. At times, it felt like she was the adult, telling her mom no, just like a child would. Gwen's mom did not like her boyfriend, Hardy, at all. "Stay away from him, dear. He's too much for you," she warned. "Why do you think that?" Gwen asked, surprised. "He won't let you control him, and trust me, that will not go well for you. You may end up hurt." Gwen laughed off her mom's concerns, but was secretly relieved when her mom returned to France. The honeymoon was a month-long cruise that her father paid for. The only issue was when she wanted to visit a nude beach, which he did not allow. They argued a bit, but he explained his view. "I'm a little traditional, you knew that when we got married. What you did before is your choice, but now I want to be the only one to see you. Please understand." Deep down, she didn't fully agree, but agreed to his wishes anyway. They moved into her townhouse, which she loved and was paid for. He liked it too, but reminded her that he wanted a bigger place with a yard when they had kids. The first year was wonderful. They enjoyed their time together and kept a strong bond, taking breaks only when she had to travel for work. Gwen worked as a contract lawyer specializing in international business, which involved a lot of travel. At first, she minimized her trips, but soon she was away at least twice a month. He joined her when possible but had his own job to handle. When she was home, many of her meetings happened at dinner, while he had to get up early for court. This made their home life a bit strained. Small issues began to feel much bigger. He wanted her to consider having children, as he was 36 and felt time was passing. "But I really love my job," she exclaimed during one of their talks. He was trying to be calm and explain his side as a trial lawyer. "I'm not asking you to quit. You're very good at what you do, and I'm sure your dad and the others appreciate your work. I just want you to think about balancing things and consider other options. Your dad wants you to get some practice with trials because he is preparing you to take over one day. Why not give it a shot? We could work together and spend more time as a team. Spend time in crowded courtrooms with people who have made mistakes, or have meetings in exciting places like London and Lisbon." She would never tell Hardy, but she loved her busy lifestyle. "I know, dear, and I will. Just not right now. I want to be really good at this first. It matters a lot to me." This made Hardy uneasy. It wasn't what she promised when they started dating. He didn't push her, thinking it was a smart move. She took it as agreement. She felt free to move at her own pace. 6 months later, she became more distant. Hardy was a runner. He had completed 2 marathons in Boston and 1 in New York. His goal was to finish, not to get first place. Gwen didn't like that he ran, saying it took time away from their relationship. He kept his feelings to himself. He ran early in the morning, and she wasn't an early bird. Many times he would run 5 miles, shower, and be ready for work before she even woke up. She was often the one to miss dinners at home, focusing on work. Gwen grew resentful of Hardy's friends. Instead of seeking out powerful connections, he spent time with local police at the gym and worked with young people who needed help. He knew every officer nearby, including the chief, and would chat with the patrol officers while running. As a defense lawyer, this was unusual for him. But he was honest and fair, always looking for the truth. People liked him until one day when he helped a patrolman who was in trouble with a suspect. Thanks to his training, he was able to step in and help, which made a name for him. The second suspect wanted to sue, but as a lawyer, he knew the risks involved. What really bothered Gwen was his church friends. On a Sunday morning, when Gwen was away in London, Hardy went running and chose a different route. He was surprised at how just 25 blocks could change from fancy homes to less wealthy areas. Deciding not to push his luck, he turned back. As he passed a church, he heard the choir singing and stopped. An older man was sitting on the steps, smoking. "Come on in, son. We always have room for one more." He politely turned the offer down. "Thank you, sir, but I'm not dressed for church," he said, looking at his sweaty shorts. "That doesn't matter to him," the man said, pointing upwards. "Come by another time. We're always here, and you're always welcome." The man stood up, brushing off his seat. "Well, I have a sermon to give. I hope he forgives me for sneaking a smoke. Everyone thinks I'm just getting ready. Setting the group on the path to success and all that. Hope you all have a great day." Hardy looked at the sign in front of the church. William Street AME Zion Church. There were many like this in Alabama. AME stood for African Missionary Expedition, a part of the Methodist Church focusing on welcoming black individuals into the community. Hardy had gone to church during his service and missed it a little. He once asked Gwen if she ever went to church, and she just laughed. The next Sunday, he stood outside the church wearing a suit. The same older man greeted him warmly and guided him inside. There was a brief moment of silence as everyone looked at him. Then people began approaching him, shaking his hand and welcoming him. The service was heartfelt, reminding him of the preachers from home. He visited his grandfather every couple of months. Gwen had never gone with him. He noticed that the choir sang without music, even though a big organ was visible off to the side. After the service, he asked the reverend about it while shaking hands. "It's broken and we don't have the money to fix it. Even if we did, we have no one to play it," the reverend explained. They shifted to another topic. "I can tell from your voice that you're not from here. Where are you from?" "I doubt you have heard of it. Limestone County, Alabama, near the Tennessee border," Hardy replied. The reverend smiled wide. "Well, I'm from Franklin County. That's why you sounded familiar." He paused, looking thoughtful. My last church was in Colbert County. There were some Wilkes living there. Any relation? Yes, preacher, unfortunately, and I know you know their reputation. In my younger days, I was just as wild as they were. Well, son, it seems like you've changed for the better. Sometimes life leads us in surprising ways. Hardy chuckled. I don't know if it was divine, but a county sheriff, a wise judge, a strict drill instructor, a rabbi, and a good psychologist all helped guide me. Brother, that sounds like a story worth sharing sometime. How about you join my wife and me for lunch? It was the best Southern cooking. There were about 20 people there, and the friendly atmosphere was nice. Gwen came with him once. 2 months later, he became a member of the church. A week later, he had the organ repaired and surprised everyone by accompanying the choir. He learned to play while rehabilitating from injuries he received during service. Playing was part of his recovery. Gwen found it amusing until she returned from a trip and saw a teenager in the kitchen. She thought it was a break-in until Hardy came out of the home office. He had been helping the boy with his studies and took a break for some drinks. They had to cancel the 911 call and speak with the police officers who came to check. This was the standard procedure when someone calls 911. She felt better but was not happy with Hardy later. I appreciate what you do, Hardy, but do you have to bring others into our home? He looked at her tiredly. Don't you mean our home? Robbie is smart and motivated. He just hasn't had many chances. I'm helping him prepare for the SAT exam. If he does well, he has a good chance for a scholarship. She realized her mistake and tried to fix things. Yes, dear, it is our home, and I am proud of your efforts. It just surprised me. I'm tired. Can you take me to bed? He did, but it felt forced, like they were just going through the motions. Their love life had really faded. When they first got married, he would sneak up behind her and playfully surprise her. She would laugh and tell him to stop, but it was all in fun. 6 months ago, he tried it again, and she surprised him by breaking free and giving him a talk about being too rough. She didn't realize then, but that was the last time he tried. Gwen was working on the biggest merger in the firm's history. 2 large companies, one based in Boston and one in Paris. The details were complicated, and her team, along with Alan's team and their partners in Paris, were working over 70 hours a week to meet a deadline set by the government. She had only been home for 2 days in 3 weeks. They had dinner with her dad, who could see that things were tense. When he tried to lighten the mood by asking about grandchildren, things took a turn. Hardy answered without much emotion. You'll have to ask Gwen. We need to actually be in the same place for that to happen. Gwen felt embarrassed. She knew she had been neglecting him, but the merger was very important. Instead of calming the situation, she snapped back. That's not fair. I need to work hard to finish the merger on time. Many people are depending on this. It will be over in a month. Then we can return to normal. Hardy surprised her. Oh, I understand, honey. The needs of the many versus the needs of the few. Our work should always come first, and I'm sure we'll get our lives back, at least until the next big project comes along. We might get 2, maybe 3 days. I guess I should be thankful for those. Her face went pale. How could he downplay her work like that? Before she could respond, her dad interrupted. Gwen, no more talking. Anything you say now could hurt both of you. It's clear you have some issues to discuss. Go home and work them out. And Hardy, I don't appreciate the idea that I would let work get in the way of your marriage. They drove home in complete silence. Later, they sat on the couch together, side by side. They seemed miles apart, even when they were in the same room. Hardy felt bad. I'm sorry for hurting your feelings. I didn't mean to say anything in front of your dad. It just slipped out. But we really need to talk. Things lately aren't how we agreed when we got married. We've lost our spark, and honestly, it feels like you've been a bit embarrassed by me when we hang out with your friends. If you don't love me anymore, just say it, and we can move on. You're too amazing to be unhappy. It would break my heart, but I want you to be happy. Gwen felt like ice water had been thrown over her. Had she really been that distant? Looking back, she realized she had not been as supportive of him during their outings. She wasn't ashamed of him. He just needed to relax a bit. She began to cry and kept saying sorry. I still love you. I'm proud of you. We will start our family soon. Just let me finish this merger, dear. We can go away for a bit and rekindle our love. Please. He held her close and whispered sweet words as she cried. He was glad she couldn't see the tears on his own face. He wanted to believe her with all his heart, but the logical side of him couldn't ignore the truth. They went to bed, holding each other close. The next morning he woke up feeling warm and pleasant, noticing she was very close to him. He lay back and enjoyed the moment, happy to feel that connection again. As she became more involved, he gently pulled her up. She looked at him with a familiar spark in her eyes. "Oh no, we're not done yet. Today we're taking an adventure. We'll start in France." She paused for a moment. "Then we'll spend some time in Greece. It's your turn to explore." They shared a moment that felt deeper than before. When everything felt right, he held her tight and told her how much he appreciated her. They shared blissful moments together, enjoying each other's presence. Later, they cuddled and stayed close for the rest of the day. On Friday, she went to work feeling happy. It seemed like things were getting better, but her good mood faded when Lisa told her the boss needed her urgently. What could he want now? She thought, feeling nervous. This can't be good. She walked into his office and he came around the desk to sit in a chair next to hers. Honey, I want you to know how proud I am of you. This merger will make you shine. You are going to get a full partnership from it. She smiled at his kind words. Maybe she had been wrong about things. He leaned back in his chair, looking at her closely with his fingers pressed together. How's everything at home? Be honest. Oh, it has been a bit rough, but we grew closer last night. I'm officially asking for 2 weeks of vacation right after the merger is done. We're going away with no phones or work, just the two of us. I'm happy for both of you. You know how I feel about Hardy. He paused, and she sensed something she might not like was coming. Honey, the other partners and I have talked it over. You've done great work in your department. We think it's time for you to move to litigation. A year or so of court experience will help you grow. This is a good step forward. In 10 or 15 years, you'll want to be ready for tougher decisions. Finish your project, take some time off with Hardy, and when you come back, you can look forward to new challenges. It felt like a hard blow. After all her effort, she was being shifted to one of the toughest areas of the firm. Court cases were usually complicated and stressful, often involving various struggles among clients. Sometimes a client would make a huge mistake and end up in serious trouble. The endless paperwork was tough enough to drive anyone crazy. Her dad saw that she was upset, but deep down he wanted her to be happy, and he knew they needed more time together to strengthen their bond. She forced a smile. Even if he was her dad, he was still her boss. Later, she closed her office door firmly and told her assistant not to interrupt her for an hour. Irrationally, she blamed Hardy for everything. He talked to Dad. I bet they spent time planning my future, even deciding on the names for my kids. That night at home, when Hardy tried to kiss her, she turned her head, offering only her cheek. He looked confused. Things seemed to be going well again. What had he done to upset her? What's going on, hon? Bad day at the office? She had been deep in thought all day and finally let it out. Like you don't know. Planning with Dad to keep me home, taking my job away. Why did you do that to me? She continued to express her frustrations for 10 minutes before he could reply. Hardy had no idea what she was talking about. Her dad had made that choice without telling him, so he was completely unaware. It took some time to learn the details, and while he felt sorry for her, he was getting annoyed. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you disliked the idea of spending more time at home so much. I had no say in the decision, but I won't lie, I'm okay with it. We made promises, Gwen, and we had a plan. We talked about this endlessly. Now, I'm starting to think it was all just a lie, like a spoiled girl saying, I want, without caring about anyone else. I was foolish enough to believe you. But you know, deep down, I always thought this would happen. We are just too different. Despite that, I still hoped it would work, and even though I'm not surprised, it still hurts. In the end, he stood over her, his pain and anger clear in his eyes. For the first time ever, she felt scared of her husband. When he turned and stormed out, she sat there in shock. To this day, she couldn't say how long she sat there, confused and surprised. Suddenly, she snapped out of it and grabbed her phone to call him. It rang and echoed until she realized it was coming from the bedroom. Did he come back while I was distracted? She wondered as she hurried to the bedroom. Of course, he wasn't there. His phone was on the nightstand, just like usual when he got ready for bed. She called his friends, the few she knew, but nobody had seen or heard from him. Feeling desperate, she even called her dad. When he heard the story, she could sense his irritation over the phone. Finally, he exploded. "You need to fix this, and fast. He's a proud man, child, and you've been hurting him lately. Wake up before you lose him, and if you want out, then end it quickly. Don't let him suffer. I knew this would happen. You're too much like your mother. I should have told him no when he asked to marry you." Gwen felt lost under his harsh words. Did he really think so little of her? She ended the call, asking him to tell her husband to come home, or at least call. "And Dad, please tell him I'm sorry and that I love him." Exhausted, she finally fell asleep around 2 in the morning. At noon, she called the local police to report him missing. Maybe they could help find him. She spoke to Officer Malone. "Hardy is missing? How long has it been?" She was surprised he used his first name, but he seemed familiar with everyone at the station. "Since 7 last night. Can you help me?" "Officially, we can't do anything for 24 hours, so did you two have a fight last night?" "Well, we had a misunderstanding, but There you go. He's probably just cooling off. If he's not back by tomorrow morning, please call for me. You might not remember me, but we met once. I'm sure he won't stay away from someone as lovely as you for long. I'll also look around today. If I find him, I'll give him a gentle reminder. Don't worry, he'll likely be home soon." She thanked him sincerely, feeling comforted by his deep, warm voice. Officer Malone spread the word and soon located him at a hotel uptown. Hardy was surprised when he opened the door. "Tommy, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "No, my prideful friend, everything is not okay. Your lovely wife reported you missing. You should have heard her. She sounded very worried." "It's not my business, but I have come to care about you. If you hadn't been there that day, my youngest might not be here now. So, as a friend, please go home. If her father decides to act up, it could cause trouble for everyone." Hardy frowned. He had thought about going home, but his stubborn side, which he had tried to control for years, had now taken over. "So now the wealthy woman has Boston's finest doing her bidding. Tell me, Tommy, how did she persuade you? A donation to your charity?" Tommy struggled to respond. By the end, Hardy was standing directly in front of him, towering over his smaller frame. Those eyes. He had never seen eyes like that. Training kicked in, and he took a step back, instinctively touching his belt. "Please relax, Hardy. She only tried to file a missing person report. I came because I thought we were friends, and I wanted to help. Sorry, it's not my place. I'll give you space." He began to leave the room, keeping his focus on Hardy's intense gaze. Hardy's posture softened a bit. "I'm sorry, Tommy. I didn't mean to be rude. I really appreciate your help, but this situation is more complicated than it seems. Please tell my wife I'm willing to talk. I hope to be calmer by tomorrow, and I'll return by 1. We can chat then. And Tommy, thank you. It's nice to know I have friends." "You're welcome. I'll see you Thursday for basketball tryouts. I think we'll have you coaching the girls this year." That was the first time Hardy smiled that day. "Really? I can barely manage one girl, and now you want me to coach a bunch of 12 and 13-year-olds? Thanks a lot." Tommy smiled back. "Don't worry too much. By the second day, they'll all adore you. They would do anything for you if you asked. Good luck, my friend." As he walked away, he touched the rosary in his pocket and said a short prayer for him. It couldn't hurt. Gwen had not been sitting idle. After the initial shock faded, she gathered her thoughts and began making calls. She reached out to Crystal Ann, but Crystal just laughed and hung up. It had only been 10 days since their last chat, and she hoped she hadn't accidentally shared her slip-up with Alan. The past week had been tense since she had to work with Alan again. She remembered their earlier conversation clearly. She liked him, but what had happened was a mistake that she wouldn't repeat. He kept dropping hints, so she distanced herself, only talking when it was necessary for work. Thankfully, they only needed 1 more week to finish the project for their clients. Alan was nice to her, trying not to upset her again, but deep down he felt frustrated. Still, he knew patience was important for sealing the deal, and he was skilled at that. Soon, he learned about her situation. He was aware of how close she was with her assistant. That night, he called her before Officer Malone had a chance to. He chose his words carefully, trying to be kind while downplaying Hardy. "I'm sure he'll return soon. He just doesn't get our world the way we do. He's not as experienced. Once he calms down and thinks about the money and your charm, he'll be back." He had been saying these things for months, subtly criticizing Hardy by highlighting his background and lack of experience. He made her doubt her own worth and whether Hardy truly loved her or just the life they had. He had even managed to convince her to visit a beach in France where she could feel free, playing on her more adventurous side. Then he empathized with her for being with someone so reserved. Her worries loomed large now. She had never thought he might walk away from her. But then Officer Malone's call gave her some hope. She genuinely listened to his words. "I don't know what went wrong and I don't need to know. But it's clear he's hurting. Whose fault it is doesn't matter. You need to talk things through. Be open and caring when he asks questions. You're both lawyers, so forget the formalities and just speak honestly. And if things work out, consider naming your son Thomas Francis." For the first time in 2 days, she laughed and promised to share the name idea with Hardy. Grateful, she ended the call. She picked out her most elegant nightgown, aiming for a look that was graceful yet inviting. After applying her favorite perfume, she slipped on a silk robe, ready for Hardy while still looking composed. She found herself praying for the first time in ages, hoping she wouldn't mess this up. Feeling content, she had a light dinner, called her dad to share her optimism about tomorrow night, enjoyed a little scotch to relax, and drifted off to sleep. Meanwhile, Alan was deep in thought as he planned his next steps. Had just left after sharing a message that Gwen had sent. "It's 1 o'clock. I need to be there at 11. If I plan this well, he'll be gone by 1:15 for good, and I'll be there to comfort her. A little kindness, a little connection, and I'm back in the game." At 10:30, he stood at her door. She opened it right away, probably expecting someone else. She looked beautiful, in a lovely dress with her hair styled perfectly. She was clearly trying hard. "Alan, what are you doing here?" "I thought I would stop by to see if Hardy was still away. You know, offer some support, try to brighten your day." "Thanks, but he should be here soon. I believe everything will be fine." "That's wonderful," he said, trying to sound excited. "I brought a bottle of champagne to cheer you up. Let's celebrate instead." "I don't know, Alan. Hardy might not like it if he shows up early and sees you here. He doesn't know about Paris, right?" "No, I told you it was a mistake. Please don't bring that up again. My lips are sealed. How about a quick drink and then I'll leave? I want to be the first to congratulate you. It would be a shame to waste this bottle." Gwen loved champagne. It was one of her favorite things. This was a special kind, hard to find. He had gone to great lengths to get it. "Well, maybe just one. Then you have to go. You're a true friend, Alan, thanks." He hugged her as the door closed. By 11, she was starting to feel the effects of the mixed drink he had given her. She leaned against him, having trouble speaking. "Come on, it's time to relax." Hardy barely slept. He missed Gwen a lot. Knowing she missed him enough to look for him made him feel better. Maybe, just maybe, things could turn around. He stopped by the church on his way home, hoping the pastor could help him. They talked for an hour. The pastor had taken some counseling courses over time, which were part of his job. The church approved, and many were even certified to help couples stay together. Deep down, he had his doubts about Hardy and Gwen. "I'm willing to help, but I'm not so sure about her. I don't really understand rich people very well." "Hardy, one important piece of advice in counseling is to ask, am I better off with her or without her? I've been praying for both of you since yesterday. I can't make the choice for you. Does she make you happy? Do you make her happy? Is there a way you can both promise to reignite your love for each other?" Tears filled Hardy's eyes. "I can't imagine life without her. I don't want that." "Then why wait? Go home to your wife, love each other. I'll tell the big man you won't be at services today. I'm sure he'll understand." The pastor held out his hand and Hardy shook it. "Thank you, Pastor. I'm not supposed to be here for another hour or so, but I'm going right now." He didn't run out of the church, but he walked very quickly. He arrived home by 11:20. Not seeing her there, he thought she might be out or still sleeping. He moved quietly to the bedroom. If she was asleep, he would let her rest and maybe slip in beside her. He began to open the door gently when he heard some loud noises from inside. No, this isn't right. No one should be in the bedroom but her. Not shy, he pushed the door open wider, making a loud noise as the handle hit the wall. What he witnessed shattered years of effort, training, and hope, All his hard work and the support from friends over the years fell away from him like a fading dream. In an instant, he turned back into the troubled person he once was. Alan was consumed by his desires, ignoring the soft protests around him. He planned to leave her vulnerable for her husband to find. That should make everything go back to normal, he thought, and then she would be his. He paused for a moment when the door swung open, then smiled. This was even more exciting. When he was finished, he figured he would teach him a lesson. He glanced over his shoulder. "Come on in here, boy. Watch what I can do." Those were the last clear words he would say for many weeks. Even through the haze of his choices, she thought his scream sounded like an angry animal. Alan may have been skilled, but when you're in such a situation, your options are very limited. Hardy grabbed his hair and pulled him away from Gwen in the bed. Alan ended up needing a neck brace for 2 months. Hardy still held him by the hair and began hitting him before he fell off the bed. In the end, Alan had a broken nose, a broken jaw, lost several teeth, broken ribs, and a broken arm. His eyes were bruised, and he had a torn ear. Oddly, he never once struck him below the belt. Gwen, regaining some awareness, shouted, trying to get Hardy to stop. He didn't hear her, and when she grabbed his arm, he thought he was being attacked and reacted out of anger, pushing her away. This caused a serious injury to her lip, requiring stitches, and she ended up needing dental work as well. She lost consciousness before she could react further. Hardy momentarily regained his senses when he saw her hit the headboard, and he paused. The only sounds in the room were his heavy breathing and the quiet cries around him. Feeling restless, he went to check on her. Satisfied that she was still breathing, he noticed a small pack of adhesive he had bought to fix a broken vase that had belonged to his mother. The vase was one of the few precious things he had left from her, and he kept it on his nightstand. She came home a bit tipsy one night and accidentally fell, breaking a piece of the hardwood floor. He didn't say anything. He simply cleaned it up and kept the pieces. He took some glue from his pocket, pulled her hair, and moved her across the floor. With the other hand, he grabbed his own hair, dragging them both through the house as if they were light. Their townhouse was on the ground floor, with a small patio out front, just big enough for a table and 2 chairs. It sat about 2 feet above the sidewalk and was surrounded by a low iron fence. Hardy liked to sit there during nice weather, greeting neighbors and reading the newspaper. Gwen rarely used it. With no free hands and fueled by anger, he kicked the front door, nearly taking it off its hinges, and pulled them both onto the patio. Thankfully, they were still unconscious, but they would wake up with sore heads and a few other aches. He propped them up against the back fence and tied their hair to it. Then he used the glue on their hair. Next, he did something inappropriate and unnatural so that her hand would stay attached to him. Feeling the need to leave, he walked down the street. People were around, but no one stopped him, even though they looked at the pair on the patio. It wasn't long before he started thinking clearly. He took out his cell phone and called for help. He didn't give his name, he just reported a disturbance at his home. After walking for a while, he reached the local police station. The first person he saw was Tommy. "Hey, Hardy, how did your talk go? Have you two made up yet?" Hardy didn't answer. Tommy, trained for many years, noticed the worry on Hardy's face, the stains on his clothes, and the way he stood. Gently, he asked, "What happened, my friend?" "It's really bad, Tommy. I found her with someone else. I lost control and hurt them both. I want to turn myself in." Tommy was shocked. He had never seen Hardy lose his temper before. He was usually the calmest person Tommy knew. At that moment, his radio buzzed with urgent messages for help. Tommy quickly made a decision, recalling how he had once saved Tommy's young son from serious trouble. "Stop! Don't say anything else. Get in the car." He opened the back door and Hardy got in silently. He wasn't arresting him yet. He just wanted to keep him where he could help. He called his captain, who notified the chief, who informed the commissioner. This situation could turn out badly for everyone involved. Tommy listened to his instructions and hung up the phone. He got into the car and drove across town. Hardy noticed and asked why they were leaving. Tommy sharply told him to be quiet, thinking it was because Hardy had not been told his rights. When they reached the gates of his father-in-law's mansion, Tommy's heart skipped a beat. "What are we doing here?" "Not a word, my boy. I'll be back soon." Leaving Hardy in the car, Tommy rang the doorbell and asked the housekeeper to get her boss. It was important police business. Greg came to the door looking confused. Mr. Kennedy, I need to speak with you urgently. Tommy looked at the housekeeper, signaling her to leave. Come inside. We can talk in my office. Once they were settled, Tommy got straight to the point. What can I do for you, officer? Malone? Sir, I'm from the 21st Precinct. Your daughter and son-in-law live there. Greg's expression changed to worry. Has something happened to my family? Are you aware that there have been some problems? Yes, my daughter called me. I believe they will work it out. Tommy sighed. I'm not so sure about that. He explained the events of the day. In touch with his captain, he learned that the daughter had minor injuries and was already in a private room. The son-in-law had several broken bones and a concussion, but he was not in immediate danger. Tommy spared Greg the details of how they were found. Greg turned pale, then straightened up, switching into his lawyer mode. Where's Hardy? I need to go to him. I'm his lawyer. First, I want to see my daughter and make sure she's okay. Have you informed him of his rights? Has he been questioned? No to both. He hasn't been charged yet, so it wasn't necessary. As for where he is, he's in the car outside. The chief wants you to call him before we go further. I'm here to help until then. Greg had the housekeeper take Tommy to the kitchen for some coffee while he made phone calls. The chief agreed to give Hardy into his care unofficially until charges could be filed. He also provided Officer Malone for a few days as support. Greg went to the kitchen and pulled Malone aside, handing him some keys and papers. Officer Malone, these are keys to my cottage on Cape Cod and directions to get there. These are keys to my Lincoln. Someone will pick up your patrol car soon. Call the commissioner. He will explain everything. Keep Hardy there until we call, even if you need to ensure he stays put. I need to speak with him privately as his lawyer. They walked to the front of the house. Just before stepping outside, Greg put his hand on Malone's arm. Thank you so much for your help, but why would you do this? Mr. Kennedy, he's one of the good ones. He does his job well and keeps things fair without taking them personally. Many defense lawyers win cases by making police look bad, but not Hardy. He's a good person. He supports the Police Youth League with both money and his time. Most lawyers just give money and leave, but Hardy is always there with us. If he ever has kids, he'll be a wonderful dad. He knows how to get them to listen and behave because he respects them and expects the same in return. I have 2 more reasons for helping him. Last year, my youngest son was a new patrol officer working in a tough area. He made a mistake, thinking he was in control while trying to handcuff a suspect. The suspect's partner was ready to hit him when Hardy happened to pass by on his run. He stopped the man just in time. My son could have been hurt badly. The second reason is that you and I share some family ties, although they are very distant. My grandmother was a Kennedy, not the famous ones, but still family. My aunt looked into our family history as a hobby. Did you know that when our ancestors came from Ireland, the workers at Ellis Island weren't always the brightest? Some could hardly spell. Some of our relatives were recorded as Kennedy, while others were listed as Cannaday, but they all belonged to the same family. You're a 5th-generation lawyer, and I'm a 5th-generation police officer. Our families have been connected for over 100 years. I learned from a young age that family takes care of each other. Greg felt overwhelmed. He had thought his family name was fading away. He reached out and Malone shook his hand. Thank you, cousin. As long as my firm is around, your family will never pay another legal fee. Family must stick together. Now excuse me while I speak to my son-in-law. He opened the car door. Get out! Hardy got out of the car slowly, avoiding eye contact. Greg began at once. Malone told me what happened. It was terrible what was done to you, and I can understand your anger towards that person, even if I can't agree with your actions. But was hurting Gwen really necessary? You could have just walked away. Hardy explained everything, emphasizing that he only acted out of anger once and felt very sorry for Gwen. He admitted he hated those who hurt others, but then he shocked Greg with what he said next. She may have saved Alan's life. I had planned to seriously hurt him. If she hadn't distracted me, it would have happened. I regret not finishing what I intended. As Greg looked at Hardy, he realized he didn't recognize him anymore. It was as if someone had switched something inside him, turning him into a different person, perhaps even a darker one. His eyes, usually bright with humor, seemed cold and empty. I need to go to the hospital. You've been released into my custody. As your lawyer and boss, I'm telling you to go with Officer Malone. Do not talk to anyone, you understand, not a soul. Your promise on this, Hardy." He nodded, and Greg watched as the Lincoln drove away. Greg arranged for both of them to be taken to a private hospital. Gwen looked terrible. Her lip and the side of her face were very swollen, covered in stitches. She also had a mild concussion. The doctors promised that in a couple of weeks she would be fine. She was mostly asleep, but during a clear moment, she recognized her dad and reached out for him. He held her until she fell back asleep. His shirt was wet from her tears, and she kept whispering sorry. He was taken aback when he saw Alan trying to connect the man in front of him with the Hardy he thought he knew. Alan's face was unrecognizable, swollen, with his jaw wired shut and bandages everywhere. What surprised him the most was that both Gwen and Alan had almost shaved heads. He thought it might be because of their treatment. When he read the police report, he was so shocked that he had to lie down. It was one of the hardest meetings he had ever experienced. A month had gone by. Gwen looked better, except for the small scars on her lip. Her hair had grown out into a simple bob. This hairstyle and her quiet nature made her seem older. She returned to her father's house after leaving the hospital. She was on medical leave from her job and hardly left her room. Greg finally insisted on therapy for her. She had attended twice, so it was too soon to know if it was helping. Alan still looked rough, with bruises healing on his face. His jaw was still wired shut, and would be for a few more weeks. His buzz cut made him look very different. Trying to keep his feelings in check, Greg spoke. "All right, you two, here's what will happen. We'll start with you, Alan. Here are your options. First, you can resign, and you won't get a reference from me. If you choose this, I'll pay for your surgery and give you $200,000. You will move far away. I suggest somewhere west of the Mississippi. I hear California has good doctors. You will sign a paper saying Hardy has no more responsibility for your medical bills. I've already paid them anyway. You will not press charges for the assault, and you will never contact him, my daughter, or this firm again." Alan shook his head, clearly considering a lawsuit and wanting to get back at Greg. Greg watched him closely for a moment. "All right, option 2. I can have you charged with assaulting my daughter and drug offenses. Your fingerprints were the only ones on the champagne bottle. Do you know how popular lawyers are in jail? You might find yourself in a tough spot very quickly. You'll also lose your license to practice law, even if you win the assault case because of the drug charges." Gwen had already said she would testify. "You're probably going to have a criminal record, and a low-paying job will be your future. The Boston Police Department is really after you because of your past. You shouldn't have been so difficult when you worked in defense. If you go even a little over the speed limit, you'll get a ticket. If you make a loud noise in public, they'll find a way to charge you. If you have even one drink at a bar, you'll face trouble. They know about your issues with drugs, so they will likely search your home, car, and you regularly. All I have to do is call the commissioner and say the word. All things considered, moving to California might be your best choice. In other words, I'll use my money and connections to make your life as hard as I can, and I'll do it happily. You shouldn't have messed with my family." He picked up the phone. "So nod yes right now, or the trouble starts." Alan felt hopeless and knew he was trapped. He was actually crying when he nodded yes. Greg smiled for the first time. "Good. Now before you leave, my daughter wants to say something to you. When she's done, I expect to hear that you're on a plane to the west within 24 hours. If not, I will make calls." Gwen stood in front of him, but he wouldn't look up. She grabbed his ear. He wanted to scream, but couldn't. "Look at me. I lost the man I cared about because of you. I always wanted to say this. Without the drugs, your skills in love are not great. I hope you have a hard life, and all that you've done comes back to haunt you." She let go and slapped him hard. The pain was intense. He hurried out of the office. The paperwork, including a payment, was waiting for him at the security desk. After he left, they sat quietly for a moment. Greg had his head buried in his hands. Gwen couldn't take the silence anymore. She had heard enough of that in the past weeks. "Thank you, Dad. Can you please get Hardy to talk to me?" It pained him to tell her, but she needed to know the truth. "Gwen, he's gone. He returned to Alabama 3 weeks ago. He isn't coming back. I barely got him to stay with the firm." Tears filled her eyes instantly. She tried to speak but couldn't manage through her sobs. "I'm sorry, it gets worse. He filed for divorce before he left. I tried to change his mind, and the reasons he gave, he claimed it was because of betrayal." Gwen fainted. Greg sent her home and called a doctor. The doctor gave her medication and advised Greg to keep an eye on her for the next few days. 3 weeks went by. He sat with her in the dining room. She hadn't said much all this time except to ask him to find her a strong divorce lawyer. She wanted to fight the divorce, but he said no. She became upset and harsh with him. He was running out of patience. The spoiled side of her was showing. "Gwen, please listen. I've thought about this a lot. I admit I share the blame for the situation we're in, along with your mother. She gave you everything and taught you to get your way. As a single dad, I spoiled you too, but not as much. Because of this and your wealth, you have a big sense of entitlement. I need to show you how things really are. Are you paying attention?" She nodded but was distracted, wondering why the divorce lawyer she contacted hadn't set up a meeting yet. "Gwen, look at me. You don't realize what your actions have cost me. I'll be dealing with the fallout for years, not even counting the money." But I kept Hardy from going to jail and kept his job. It was close for a moment. When Alan wouldn't press charges, a young assistant district attorney thought it was a good chance to make a name for himself and decided to go ahead. Do you know how it feels to ruin someone's life? I was going to, but cooler heads prevailed. Important people convinced him it wasn't the right move. I think it's time for some tough love. You need to grow up and understand the real world. I'm sorry, but you no longer work for the firm. The recent scandal has caused too many problems. Clients want to work with someone who can handle their own affairs. So you're out of a job. I have no choice. Her jaw dropped. What did he just say? It gets worse, Gwen. You've been putting most of your salary into stock options and only keeping a small amount in your checking account. You've always had your trust fund, and I let you use it whenever you wanted something. Starting today, you can't access your trust fund anymore. Your stock options are locked in and you can't cash them out. Your grandmother was clever. She put a clause in the trust that says if you show bad judgment, the release of the fund can be delayed until your 50th birthday. She was worried you might follow in your mother's footsteps, and don't think about the townhouse. It belongs to the trust. So now you're out of a job without a place to live and low on money. Here's what will happen. You can refuse, but it will be tough to find work anywhere nearby. And yes, I've made it difficult for you. If you accept what I'm offering and behave yourself, you can come back to the firm in a year. By then, someone else will have made a mistake big enough to take the attention off you. I'll even pay for a good therapist if you can find one where you're going. He handed her some papers. Congratulations, you are now officially the newest Assistant District Attorney of Franklin County, Alabama. You start next week. Your annual salary is $38,000. I'm a college friend of the district attorney and he helped me out. I've helped you too. I got you a nice apartment and handled the security deposits, but you'll need to pay the rent from your salary. Remember, you can't take your Lexus because it's leased by the firm. I did arrange a nice Ford Focus for you. They say it's a fun little car. I covered the deposits, but you'll need to make the monthly payments yourself. You'll also be responsible for your phone and utility bills. The only condition from my old friend about your job is that you'll have a drug test once a month. It will be private, and only he will see the results. I guess someone told him about your recent issue. If you fail once, you're out of a job and I won't be able to help you. Just stay clean, do a good job, and show that you can take care of yourself, and I'll welcome you back. If you don't, you better hope they have openings in Iowa or North Dakota. Oh, and you can't fly. You can't afford it. You'll be taking the train. You're only allowed 3 bags, so pack wisely. You can refuse if you want, but if you do, be out by tomorrow. I mean it. He stood up from the table, leaving her stunned. He paused at the door. One more thing. Hardy is running an office for me 2 counties over. You shouldn't have any work-related interactions, but if you do, be on your best behavior. Oh, I forgot to mention, you'll be practicing under your maiden name. Hardy has it in the divorce papers that you need to give up his name, so you might as well start getting used to it. He walked out, leaving her with tears of hopelessness running down her cheeks. She got off the train, tired and unhappy after a long journey. The heat and humidity felt overwhelming. Who would choose to live here? She thought as she pulled her bags behind her. No one offered to help. So much for the southern hospitality you hear about in stories. Maybe Hardy spread the word. Thinking of him brought a quick sting of pain. Yes, what happened was her fault, but he should have fought for her. She hadn't seen him since that morning. She had begged her father and Crystal Ann to help. Crystal just laughed a little before showing sympathy. Girl, he's gone. He isn't coming back. I told you what would happen if he caught you, but you went ahead anyway. Again. And now he knows about Paris, thanks to Alan's email. Consider it a lesson learned. You know what really frustrates me? I've known him for nearly 20 years, and you were the first person I saw him truly care for. I can't tell you how jealous I felt. I really didn't like you, but he was happy, so I tried to accept it. Now that you've hurt him, he'll be even more careful and less trusting. He might never love again. I'm going to help him. I'll take care of him and give him everything he needs. Basically, I'm going to do my best to win his heart. Gwen felt a rush of pain, which quickly turned into anger. Good luck with that. He's in Alabama and you're here. That's going to make it hard for you to comfort him, and he's still mine. I won't let him go. I just need to see him and ask him to listen to me. I can fix things. I know I can. Crystal Ann looked at her with sympathy. It's been 3 months and he hasn't even mentioned your name. The closest he came was calling you something unkind. Just give up and let him find some peace. This is my last week here. I'm going to work for him in Alabama. He'll forget you if I have to make it my mission. Goodbye, Gwen. If you find someone new, treat him better than you did Hardy. Gwen felt like she might explode with anger until she heard her father's voice. He took her arm and led her away, wishing Crystal Ann good luck with her new job and offering to help her if things didn't work out. Once they were in his office, she lost her temper. Daddy, you need to let her go. She's going there to try to win over my husband. How can you wish her well? Her outburst didn't seem to bother him. He pointed to a chair and told her to sit down. Gwen, I wished her well because she's a good person and a valuable worker. What she does with your soon-to-be ex-husband isn't my concern. I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but I think she could make him very happy, and maybe even give him the family he wanted so much with you. The truth is, you let him go. Don't get angry if someone else gives him what he needs. Tears started to flow down her cheeks again. It had been months, and she still felt terrible. Maybe she really did love him. For the first time, her father felt a twinge of guilt for how things had turned out. But he shook it off and focused on the topic at hand. You're leaving for Birmingham at the end of the week. Are you ready? She nodded, still shocked that he was making her do this. As ready as I can be. Please, Daddy, let me stay. Find me a job somewhere else. I won't bring shame on you. Gwen, I don't think you could embarrass me more than you already have. I tried to keep it quiet, but the story was too big not to share. Trouble, betrayal, all we needed was a band to complete the picture. Your name is spoken poorly around here, and it will be for a while. Finish your year, gain some experience, and maybe grow up a little. When the time is right, you can come back home. Gwen stopped crying. Daddy, I'll do it. I'll serve my time and behave, but I'll be in the same situation as him pretty close. Soon we'll meet again. I'll get my chance to ask him to come home. I'll help you if you do one thing for me. He looked at her, expecting something wild. Ask me. But if I don't like it, I'll say no, and you'll be out of luck anyway. To his surprise, she knelt down, something he had never seen her do. I'm asking, Daddy. Please help me find a lawyer to fight for my marriage. I have some money saved up, enough to pay for it. All I want is a chance to talk to him. You've spread the word. No one will speak to me since they learned who I am. Please, Daddy, please. He had never seen her like this. Maybe there was a chance for her to change. He thought for a moment. She stayed on her knees, her face showing hope and despair. All right, I'll get Ivan. But if you make a scene, we'll all regret it. Promise me you'll behave. She started to cry again. Between her tears, she promised everything he wanted to hear. Looking into her eyes, he believed she meant it. Ivan Asimov was one of the best divorce lawyers in the state. What made him different was that he always preferred talking things out rather than fighting. He was the lawyer you went to when you didn't truly want to end your marriage. She had seen him twice before leaving. He had asked her many questions, and when she was done, he honestly told her it didn't look good, but he would do his best. Saying a little prayer for his help, she returned to her tasks, carrying her bags. She was so focused on her work that she didn't see the man come up to her. Ms. Cannaday, right? She looked up. He was tall, a bit hunched, wearing a wrinkled suit. He was balding with a bit of a belly, looking like a typical office manager. He extended his hand. "I'm Paul DuPont, the district attorney for Jefferson County. I promised your father I would meet you and help you settle in. Let me take those bags." Before she could respond, he grabbed her two biggest bags and started walking. "He's stronger than he looks," she thought as she followed him. Her bags were heavy. When you pack your life into 3 bags, you learn to make every inch count. After placing the bags in the trunk of his large Ford, he opened the door for her. As she got in, he turned the air conditioner up. "Sorry about the heat. You're visiting during the hottest summer we've had in 60 years. You'll get used to it." Not likely, she thought, glancing out the window at the dry, brown grass and trees. She didn't say much, but it didn't matter because he seemed to enjoy talking. "As I live and breathe, I never thought I would have the daughter of Greg Cannaday working with me. You never really know what to expect. How is he? Still playing pranks like he did in college? I remember when he took a piece of clothing from our ethics teacher to make a project for history class. She wasn't too pleased about it. He tried to explain it as needing good materials, but she didn't believe him. He had to do a lot of extra work to make up for that. She made sure he had to join her at a school event, and he was quite anxious about it. Pranks? Taking clothes? This was a side of her dad she had never seen before. He noticed her reaction. "Well, we were young back then. We all grow up." They drove in quiet for a while. He pulled into the Ford dealership and she looked at him. "We're here to pick up your car. Then I'll take you to your apartment to get the keys. Later, I'll show you around the office and introduce you to some of your co-workers." He looked at her for a moment and she felt the strength in him. "Before we get out, I need to discuss a few things. Your dad told me about how you got here. I'll be checking your drug test results. If there's any sign of anything stronger than beer, you're out. No questions asked. Just do your job well, keep your head down, and this year will go by fast. Most of my staff are married. If I suspect anything unprofessional, you'll be leaving the same day. What you do outside of work is your business, but remember, don't mix personal matters with work. Understand?" At first, she was angry at his lecture, but then she calmed down. She realized that her current situation was partly her fault, and he had a point. "Mr. DuPont, I promise to give my best effort here, and as for personal matters, all I want is to get my husband back so I won't engage with anyone else." He studied her and nodded. "I'll hold you to that. Believe it or not, I know your husband. To be honest, I doubt you'll see him again. He has a reputation for not being kind, and I've seen it myself. Truly, I'm surprised you're safe." She must have looked shocked. "What on earth do you mean? My husband is the kindest person I know. His name is Hardy, not that other name." He looked at her with sympathy. "Here's some advice. Don't tell anyone who your husband is. There are still those who think poorly of him. He earned that bad reputation early on. He was involved in many troubles growing up and had some close calls. He ended up in trouble, but good lawyers helped him out. I finally had enough evidence against him, but the local sheriff and the judge, who was his father-in-law, helped him join the military in exchange for a clean record. I always wondered what he had over them. But he's back now, and I'm patient. Sooner or later he'll show his true self again, and I'll be ready for him. Just keep quiet about him. There are still many people who dislike him and even more who fear him. They might try to use you to their advantage." The car was quiet for a few moments. "I'm struggling to understand the man I know compared to what you've told me. He cares about people, especially children. I've never heard him be rude to anyone. Check the records when you can, but be careful. He ran a group of troublemakers called the Redneck Mafia. People were more afraid of him than they were of us. He was so feared that if he set fire to the back of someone's house and challenged them to come out, most would think it was safer to stay inside the burning house. I hope you're right, that he has really changed, but I'll hold off on my judgment until I learn more. Now let's get your car." After a few minutes of signing documents, she got her car. It was a shiny red Ford Focus. It was nice, but much smaller than her Lexus at home. The apartment was 2 bedrooms, small but brand new. It looked to be in a nice neighborhood. The offices were small and cluttered since space was limited. She was introduced around and left with Karen Thomas, a senior assistant district attorney. "This is it, dear. What you see is what you get. There's hardly any privacy and very little time for each case, so you need to think quickly. We share staff here. No one has a personal assistant, so you'll need to handle many tasks yourself. Most of the cases are straightforward. They did something wrong and were foolish enough to get caught. Most of the time, they settle and it doesn't go to trial. Paul and I take on the tougher cases. The economy is affecting everyone, increasing crime and reducing our resources. Don't worry. We'll start you off gently until you get used to things. After that, it's up to you. Here's my card. If you need help or just want to chat, call me after 6. I'll be happy to assist. She paused to make sure her words sank in. Once satisfied and finding them alone in her small office, she continued, Paul and I are the only ones who know who you were married to. I know he warned you, and you're aware he holds some resentment. I didn't know about his past, but I faced him several times in court. If his instincts in court are as sharp outside of it, he could be very dangerous. People usually don't change, but in your case, he might have tried to hide his true self. Your actions may have peeled away some of his cover, revealing who he really is. Be careful if you find yourself near him. Things could go wrong. Gwen glanced at her friend's serious expression and realized she had no clue who she had married. Hardy leaned back in his office chair, looking out of the window. The thermometer read 103 degrees. It was another hot day. His time in Boston had made him softer, and he was struggling with the heat. He knew that over time, he would get used to it again. Still, he made sure to go for his runs early in the morning when it was cool. As he looked at the email on his screen, his frown deepened. He had left the military long ago. Why were they calling him back? The email was full of military jargon, but the main point was clear. He needed to see Major Stein, his old doctor, for a follow-up visit. It was just routine, or so they said, but it was mandatory. If he refused, someone from CID would come for him, with orders to take him in. He replied to confirm he would be at Fort Stewart, Georgia, the following week. He realized it might be good for him to talk to the major. The man probably understood more about him than anyone else. Since his breakup, he had been struggling, trying hard to control his anger with others. It wasn't fair to his clients, most of whom were fighting serious battles, and they needed him to be at his best. That night, as he got out of the shower, he looked at the scars across his chest, arms, legs, and back. Most came from his time in Iraq, but a few, including a bullet scar, happened before he left Alabama. There was only one scar he felt proud of, a small mark hidden beneath a tattoo of a snake, a copperhead, just as tough as a rattlesnake, but without a warning. No one outside his close friends understood its meaning. He had told Gwen it was a spur of temperament choice. When she suggested he remove it, he told her it was a reminder to think carefully before acting. In his office, Major Stein reviewed his notes on Hardy Wilkes. He didn't need to look too closely. He could remember every detail. Hardy had always caught his interest. He was above average in intelligence and size, and his good humor helped him make friends easily. But as Stein got to know him better, he realized he was dealing with someone unpredictable. Hardy had initially thrived in military life, enjoying the discipline it offered. The first signs of difficulty appeared in his 7th week of boot camp. The drill instructor shared the story, saying Hardy reacted strongly when someone insulted his mother. In the South, that was a big deal. "He caught me off guard, Major. He seemed like just another friendly Southern guy," the instructor explained. In every group of recruits, there's always one who believes they are smarter and tougher than everyone else. He was the one I needed to challenge to get the others to follow. At first, I looked past him, focusing on the troublemakers and the ones who spoke too loudly. But soon I noticed him. He never talked back or disobeyed, but there was a spark in his eye that said, "I'm doing this because I want to, not because you can make me." I decided to change that. I gave him all the tough jobs and made him work harder than anyone else. He did everything I asked with a silly smile as if he found it amusing. It was driving me mad. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I set up a scene where I was being tough on him in front of the others. I teased him and asked if he was afraid of me. That smile was back. "No, sir. I respect you, but I don't fear you." I felt like I was losing my grip. I told him and the other recruits to meet for a special duty 1 hour after dinner, without their shirts. When he arrived, I was there with 2 other instructors, also without our shirts. "All right," I said. "There's no rank here, and no one will report this. If anyone thinks they can take me on, step forward. None did, so I began to tease a few others until I got to Wilkes. Come on up. Let's see what someone unafraid can do. He just laughed. He actually laughed. Then he said that since there was no rank, he could call me a fool and walk away. Just like that, I had lost control. As he started to walk away, I yelled after him, "Leave, coward! I bet your mother would be proud of the weakling she raised." Finally, I got a reaction. He turned around, his eyes blazing. "My mother didn't raise me. She passed away when I was young. Didn't anyone teach you to respect the dead?" I knew I had hit a nerve. I started saying bad things about his mother. I wanted to say something about his father, too, but I figured he probably didn't know who he was. I could see my words were getting to him. He seemed really angry, and just as I prepared for him to rush at me, he smiled again. Then he calmly walked up close, looked me right in the eye. I'll never forget what he said. "If you want to send a message to someone before this starts, now's the time. In about 30 seconds, I'm going to start hitting you, and I won't stop." Now, I've been in tough situations before, and I had trained others in close combat, so I know how to fight. But there was no doubt in my mind that if the other instructors and recruits hadn't been there, I would have been in serious trouble. I managed to land a few good hits, but he had skills I never expected, and he didn't stop, even when I did. It took 7 people to pull him off me. I lost 2 teeth, had 7 broken ribs, a cracked femur, and 2 broken toes. Goodness, Doc, he even bit me. I needed 4 stitches to close it up. He broke the nose of one drill instructor and managed to hit the other a few times before the recruits held him down by laying on top of him. The other drill instructor got us to the infirmary. The recruits said they had to keep him down for 45 minutes before he calmed down. Of course, everything got chaotic after that. You can't hide that many injuries, and word spread quickly. He would have been kicked out, and I would have been sent home, but he stepped up and told the commanding officer it was just an advanced training exercise for the recruits that got a bit out of control. He knew it was not true, but it worked, so he went along with it. He also made sure Hardy was sent to long-range recon school, which is known to be very tough. I don't know what happened to him after that. The major knew. Hardy was at the top of his class in recon training, went on 1 tour in Iraq, earning 2 Purple Hearts and facing 3 reprimands. After a year training others back home, he went back to active duty. He was in the middle of his 2nd tour when the incident occurred. He remembered the reports, including the interview with the lieutenant in charge. "We were trapped in a small valley and never saw it coming. The enemy was positioned on a hill and had a clear shot. We had only a small opening to move. I had already lost 2 men and 3 were injured. Every time one of us tried to move, they hit us. The injured needed help, but our communication system was down. They later explained it was due to an unusual weather condition. I was really worried when a voice I had never heard before came close to me. "Wow, Lieutenant, what kind of trouble have you gotten into?" I was startled. This person seemed to appear out of nowhere. He was tall and slim with gray eyes and a strange smile. "How did you get here?" "Just like you, but I was quieter. They are trying to surround you, but the first 2 they sent out didn't make it. Stay calm. This might take some time." And just like that, he was gone, leaving his backpack and rifle. I watched him for a while, and it felt like he vanished. About an hour later, I thought he had really left. But then gunfire erupted from a cave, along with a lot of yelling and what sounded like an animal growling. It quieted down after about 10 minutes, except for what seemed like a child screaming. Our interpreter said it was a kid, crying that he was surrendering, pleading for help, asking for mercy. I decided to take a chance, and we rushed to the cave. There were 7 men inside, and 5 of them were dead. One survivor was a boy. We found out later that he was 15, curled up in a small space at the back of the cave, begging for mercy. The other man still alive was Hardy. He had been shot 3 times, once through his right arm, breaking it. He had hurt his left leg when he fell into the cave. Later, he said it was deeper than he expected. He had been cut twice and still had a weapon hanging from his back. His sidearm had stopped working after he fired 4 shots. He managed to take down 3 people before it jammed and then used his knife. One person was stabbed in the heart, but another fought back fiercely. That person was wounded multiple times. The young man had panicked. It was his first time in a fight. What scared him most was that, despite his injury, Hardy was dragging himself toward the boy with his knife still in hand. It was clear he meant to harm the boy as soon as he got close enough. The medic had to give him 2 doses of pain relief to calm him down. He was swinging the knife around, and it took a while for him to realize we were not his enemies. While we waited for the helicopter, we followed his trail and found 5 more men who were no longer alive, all with similar wounds. Later, we learned one of the men he attacked was the son of a Taliban leader, and the boy was his grandson. Things got so tense for those with light hair that they even brought in hair dye. We even got some wigs and started leaving bits of them around while on patrol just to confuse them. Of course, he was back home by then. You hear all sorts of stories while you're over there, but I never thought they were real until that moment. He was one of those guys they sent out alone with orders to cause as much trouble as he could. I wonder how many others following his path are now facing their consequences. He was the toughest man I ever met. The major remembered when he first treated him. The idea of PTSD was becoming more recognized, and the military was understandably concerned. They wanted to assess him fully before he went back to civilian life. He had read the initial report, and it seemed the man should have been removed from duty due to previous issues. When he finally met him, he was surprised. The man seemed relaxed and cheerful with a friendly smile. It took a while to understand more about his thoughts and beliefs. It wasn't until they talked about his childhood that he began to see a deeper side. The smile faded as he recalled harder times. He recounted his past clearly. I was 12, my sister was 11. My dad was often in trouble, always getting arrested for small crimes. Eventually he got caught for stealing cars. His lawyer said he was likely going to prison but would try to get him a shorter sentence. The lawyer said he could lower the bail, but it would take some time. In the end, our grandfather paid the bail. Mom and the lawyer planned to get him out the next day, but he decided to surprise Mom by coming home early. When we got home from school, he was sitting in his truck. He got out and welcomed us, leading us to the vehicle. I remember seeing some stains on his shirt. Kiddos, we're going to sit here for a while. I have something important to tell you. I love you both very much. I'm going away for a long time, Hardy. I need you to be strong and look after your sister. Make sure she is safe. Promise me. I promised. He then turned to my sister. Sissy, you will grow up to be just as beautiful as your mom. Find a good person to love and cherish them, and promise me on your honor that you will always be true to him. You may not understand now, but you will later. He hugged us tightly, tears in his eyes. It was the first and only time I saw him cry. In the distance, we heard sirens, and soon, several sheriff cars arrived. The first officer was Will Rob Williams. Back then, he was just a deputy, but later he became sheriff. He knew our family well. His daughter was a year behind Sissy, and my mom babysat for them. I was surprised to see him with his weapon drawn. Jimmy, step away from the kids. He stood up calmly, arms outstretched. Will Rob, I don't have a weapon. It's lying in the bedroom. I called you. I'm ready to cooperate. Just don't frighten my kids any more than necessary. He offered his hands to be restrained. Will Rob cuffed him and led him to the patrol car, unknowingly with me following closely behind. He had found 2 people together, and in a moment of distress, he grabbed an old gun and lashed out. I fell into shock. It took me a long time to recover. 2 years later, my dad lost his life in a prison incident while protecting someone. Honestly, I never moved past that. I got into some trouble, hung out with the wrong crowd, and ended up in a juvenile facility a couple of times. Eventually, I got caught for stealing cars. Will Rob and the judge gave me a chance to change my path, join the military, and have a clean start. I actually liked the military, but it's not something I see myself doing for a lifetime. If I'm still here, it's a good sign that others don't want that either. The major asked him why he targeted the boy when he clearly tried to surrender. When I dropped into the cave, he was the one operating the machine. He looked thrilled, as if it was the most exciting moment. One thing I learned long ago is to never let your guard down. If he hadn't panicked, I could be in a very different situation. I wasn't going to let him have another chance to hurt someone. He spoke calmly, as if it were just a rational thought. He was correct. He might never be fit for a long-term role. His unpredictability made him an interesting candidate for some, but the major wanted to steer him in a better direction. He was surprised to learn that Hardy had taken every chance to learn and only needed 1 more semester to finish his business degree. Hardy would be in rehab for at least another year, so the major wanted to encourage him to continue his studies. Although he never pictured Hardy as a lawyer, he had the right qualities. He was smart, had strong instincts, and was good at reading people. He could think quickly in tricky situations. By the time Hardy finished his physical and mental recovery, the major believed he could manage his feelings and become a responsible member of society. Still, he decided to keep a close eye on him. In the end, he diagnosed Hardy with PTSD. Only he knew it stemmed from an event that happened when Hardy was just 12 years old. Now it seemed that Hardy might be struggling again. If he didn't give a solid report after his interview, the major wasn't sure what would happen next. Gwen felt unhappy with her life. Working day to day with difficult people took away her joy. Getting used to the job took time. Her first case involved a car theft. It was straightforward. The man was caught in the car, and the tool he used to break in had his fingerprints all over it. He insisted he had borrowed it from a friend, but he couldn't provide a name or address. The young man claimed he hadn't been in the car at all. Gwen was shocked. The public defender, aware of her inexperience, tried to negotiate for him to get probation. While she was new to court cases, she was familiar with striking deals, which turned out to be a big part of her job. Karen was observing, and she wanted to impress. She leaned back and watched them squirm. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "Your client is on video being pulled from the car, yelling and causing a scene. He had illegal substances in his pocket and was over the legal limit for alcohol. His past record is extensive. I'm new here and I would love the chance to go to trial to improve my skills. I have to offer you a deal, but I hope you won't accept it. Something about your client bothers me. Here's the offer. Plead guilty to the car theft and I'll overlook the drugs and alcohol. I'll also push for rehab. You have until I come back to decide. If you refuse, I'll pursue all charges and the penalty will be much harsher. With his history, it will take a long time before he can steal again." As she left, she saw Karen and the defendant looking stunned. She really needed a break, and when she returned, Karen was smiling. "They took the deal before you even had time to breathe. The public defender will probably tell his office about the tough new assistant district attorney. I think you'll do well here, but be warned, not every case will be this simple." Things were indeed challenging. The workload was heavy. She began bringing her work home since she had little else to occupy her time. This caught the attention of her boss, Paul, who called her into his office. "Listen, I'm impressed. You have what it takes to be a great trial lawyer, but you need to have some fun too. Remember, all work and no play isn't good for you. Go out, have a drink or two, chat with people, and maybe enjoy some light banter. I've heard whispers about the Ice Queen from the north. You'd be surprised how many guys want to get to know you better." Before she could respond, he switched topics. "How's the divorce going? I see you still wear your ring, which is probably keeping others at bay. But once word gets out that you're going through a divorce, people might come after you." She sighed. Ivan had been very persistent, insisting on mandatory counseling, but so far she had managed to avoid it. Strangely, Hardy's lawyer didn't seem eager to move things along. It had been 6 months since her marriage ended, and she still hadn't seen or spoken to him. "I'm not sure how it's going. Nothing seems to happen. I can't talk to him, and he won't talk to me. I'm beginning to lose hope." She couldn't believe she still cried over Ivan. It was hardest at night when she turned over, expecting him to be there to hold her and kiss her goodbye in the morning, only to find herself alone. On Fridays, she went out for drinks with Karen and some friends from work, or caught a movie with a couple of female friends, but that was about all she did. She joined a gym to help manage her stress. The loneliness was tough on her, and she would have given anything to see Hardy again. Then one day, she received an unexpected surprise. A small man, looking to be in his late 60s or 70s, and a tall woman, maybe in her mid-40s, came to visit her at her apartment. She didn't recognize them, but once they introduced themselves, she quickly welcomed them inside. "You might not remember us, but we were at your wedding. I'm Joshua Hardy. Hardy Wilkes is my grandson. This is my niece, Hildy Baker. If it's all right, we'd like to spend some time with you." She led them to the living room and asked if they wanted any drinks. Hildy asked for iced tea, but frowned when Gwen said all she had was unsweetened. Gwen was still getting used to the sweet tea that many Southerners enjoyed. Joshua asked for a beer, They both enjoyed a St. Pauli girl, which was one of Gwen's favorite kinds. After a sip, the elderly man spoke up. "We came to talk about Hardy. He's not doing well at all. He's been seeing a therapist from his time in the service and won't say much about it. He's quite on edge, and the entire family is being very careful around him. You know all too well how he can react when he's upset. We need your help." Tears filled her eyes again. She couldn't hold them back. "I want to help you, but he really doesn't want to see me. He made that very clear. Still, I will do whatever you ask." Joshua cleared his throat. "He still cares for you. I know he keeps a picture of you on his dresser. He says it reminds him of his mistakes, but I think he struggles with that. He feels very ashamed of what happened when he found you with that man, not just for getting angry, but for what he did afterward." Gwen felt a strong urge to touch her chest. It hurt a lot to remove the glue, and some skin came off with it. Alan had it worse. He injured himself in a very sensitive spot. He was in so much pain that he needed medicine to help him heal. What she didn't know was that it took him a long time to feel normal again. "It was tough for me, too. If he wanted to teach me a lesson about cheating, it worked. What he doesn't know is that I was drugged, and what happened to me wasn't okay. I even remember trying to push him away." Hildy looked more interested after hearing this. "If that's true, it could help your case. Do you have proof?" "I can get the test results from the hospital. Would that be useful?" She frowned. "It could be. But Hardy said you had seen that man before in Paris. Is that true?" Gwen felt embarrassed, and it was hard to find the right words. "I'm sorry to say that it is. There were drugs, but I took them willingly. It was a foolish choice, and I can't explain why I did it." Joshua spoke with sadness. "That might be a big problem. If it had only happened once and you had been drugged, he might understand. But twice, I doubt he will." He then shared more about Hardy's past and why cheating upset him so much. Gwen felt chills as she listened. "It's worse than you think. Did you know he has a sister? He hasn't spoken to her in 10 years. Why? Because he cut her off from the family. She married a good man, but 2 years later she cheated and Hardy found out. He really hurt her and her lover. Then he took his anger out on her husband, who had no idea. They managed to work things out a few months later, but moved away because they were scared of him. She has 3 kids now, but they are afraid to visit. Her lover vanished without a trace, leaving everything behind. There's a pond out in the woods that no one dares to fish in." Gwen felt overwhelmed. Could it be true that she was married to someone like that? Why did she still love him so much and want him back? "Please, Mr. Hardy, how can I help? I will do anything." "Well, if you are ready, the first thing we need to do is get you to meet him in person. The family reunion is always on the second Saturday in September. That is 3 weeks from now. He never misses one. I have always wondered why you didn't come. Anyway, be there and we will make sure you can meet him while we keep an eye on things, just in case it gets tense. Are you willing?" She nodded, unable to speak. "Great. Come this Sunday for dinner. That's lunch for you folks up north. I want to chat with you more. Give Hildy your number, and she will give you directions. Thanks for your time." As they got ready to leave, she surprised everyone by kissing his cheek and hugging Hildy. Feeling shy, she stepped back, but he patted her cheek and Hildy smiled. "See you Sunday. Get there before noon." She watched as they drove away in an older pickup, feeling hope for the first time in months. Hardy felt restless and on edge. His meeting with Major Stein was tough, but he was surprised when he set up regular appointments every 2 weeks. He recommended a medicine to help him relax. He hated taking it, as it felt like admitting he was losing control. But it actually seemed to work. Crystal coming home also brightened him up, but he knew she had her own reasons, so he spent limited time with her. He didn't want to give her false hope. He just wasn't looking for a relationship right now. She understood, but still made it clear she was around if he needed her. Working on cases kept him busy. Greg let him choose the cases he thought were worth his time. There were plenty since his services were in high demand, especially if they were free. Most cases involved people in difficult situations. Some were guilty, but there were reasons behind their actions. He aimed to help the innocent and make sure the guilty were treated fairly. His good name was spreading, and he began to receive job offers from top firms across the country. Greg checked in with him almost every week. He knew Greg wanted to talk about his daughter, but every time the topic came up, Hardy changed the subject and hung up. Unbeknownst to Hardy, Greg was keeping a close eye on his daughter and felt good about what he saw. Paul had nice things to say about her, but worried about her well-being. All she does is work and stay home, and often she brings her work with her. Her drug tests are all clear. She hardly goes out, as far as I know. How unhealthy is that for her? He still spoke to her once a week, and the conversations were always similar. She would discuss a case in vague terms and seek his advice. Then she would ask if Ivan had news for her. The answer was always the same. He was still working on it. What he didn't tell her was that he had a little talk with Hardy's lawyer, suggesting he take his time with the legal motions. The man was surprised that someone as important as Greg would suggest he not look out for his client. However, they were old friends, and Greg, along with Ivan, convinced him that perhaps divorce was not the best choice for anyone involved. So, everything slowed down. The only good thing for Hardy was reconnecting with his family, mostly cousins from his mother's side. His dad had one brother who died in Vietnam and one sister who passed away in a car accident many years ago. He and his sister were the only ones left to inherit their grandfather's farm. He had a special bond with Aunt Hildy. She was like the mother he never had. Every Sunday, he shared dinner with his grandfather and any cousins who could make it. Even though they were connected only through his daughter-in-law, they treated Joshua like a grandparent, perhaps because he was a kind man, or because their own grandparents were no longer around. Family meant a lot to them. He often thought that his family operated like a matriarchal society. They respected his grandfather, but Aunt Hildy was the one who settled disputes and gave advice to the younger ones. No one dared to challenge her. Luckily, she had a natural wisdom and a lot of common sense. This was common throughout the South. When you saw someone, the first thing they often asked was, "How's your mama and them?" This showed what they valued. Typically, everyone brought a dish to share, and there was always enough fried chicken, pork chops, hamburgers, or steaks for all. If there wasn't enough, they cooked more. This was the highlight of his week, so he was very disappointed to be traveling and miss dinner this time. Gwen was unsure of what to expect, so she appreciated Aunt Hildy's advice. Not being a great cook, she arrived at 9 with 2 cases of St. Pauli beer, ready to help Hildy. Joshua was happy to see the beer and quickly cooled it while Hildy warned him not to touch it before dinner. By 10 o'clock, people began to arrive. Gwen had perfected her tea-making skills and had several gallons ready to chill. She struggled to keep track of all the introductions. "Don't worry, dear, you'll get the hang of it. For now, just smile and be polite. They'll warm up to you soon." What surprised her the most was when the teens and younger guests called her Aunt Gwen. Hildy explained this to her. "Be proud. When they call an older woman aunt, even if you're not related, it's a sign of respect and acceptance. They all know who you are now, though many will be too polite to mention it. Now help me with the burgers and hot dogs." It turned out to be the most enjoyable afternoon she had experienced since moving south. After the meal, she found herself surrounded by women of all ages, from teens in their 20s to some in their late 50s. They sat in the shade of an oak grove while the men went off to play horseshoes and enjoy drinks. The questions came quickly. Was she really a lawyer? What was Boston like? Did she like it here? The questions felt endless until one of them asked about Uncle Hardy. What was he like? To the younger ones, he was like a legend, a war hero married to a woman from Boston known for helping others. She chose her words carefully. "He's the best man I've ever known, kind and thoughtful, a true gentleman." One girl pressed her. "If he's so great, why are you not together anymore? I hear stories. You're in Birmingham and he's up here. I heard he hurt you." Tears started to form, but she held them back. "He didn't hurt me badly. He once hit me because he thought he had to. We're not together now because I made a mistake, and he lost trust in me. I'm trying to make things right." Hildy had been listening closely. "Melissa Sue, watch what you say. Aunt Gwen needs support right now." Melissa Sue quickly apologized and hugged her. That gesture opened the floodgates, and tears streamed down her face. The other girls joined in, hugging her one after another. For the first time, she felt free to grieve openly, and it took a while for the tears to stop. Later, while she helped clean up, Hildy offered her encouragement. "You made some friends today. You were honest, and you took responsibility. They respect that. Just be yourself and they will come around. Now, take some leftovers home. I'll get the containers." Hildy hugged her, and Joshua surprised everyone by kissing her cheek. That simple act made her feel accepted by the group. As she drove away, she thought about all the formal events she had attended over the years. None compared to sitting at a picnic table with people who saw her as family, not just for her status or wealth, but simply as Aunt Gwen. The mood was serious at work that Monday, but for the first time in a long while she felt hopeful. As she got ready for the day, Paul called her into his office. Karen was there, and she felt a sense of dread. Paul seemed uneasy, rambling on. She decided to interrupt. "What's happening, Paul?" He sighed and replied, "Let me explain. We have some problems. For some reason, we're caught in a drug route. They bring it in through the swamps and bayous of Louisiana and along the coast of Mississippi. Then it's a straight route north. You know how many highways cross right in town? We've made some arrests and seized a good amount, but it's not nearly enough. There's been more local activity lately, and we believe the cartel has decided to settle in. Local dealers are feeling the pressure, and conflicts are starting to happen. It's becoming chaotic. On Saturday, we caught a break. A county deputy pulled over a car that was swerving. The driver was high and had enough drugs in his car to face serious charges. The driver is Raul Escobar, the nephew of the cartel leader, Don Vincente. They have a history in Mexico of dealing harshly with law enforcement. Rumors are already spreading. This could get serious. It might not go to trial for a few months, but for now, he's in jail without bail because he's not a citizen and is a big flight risk. I want you to handle the case. You have no family here, so there's little chance of threats against you. Will you take it?" She paused for a moment, thinking. "So I'm the one they are putting on the line. I'll be gone in a few months, and no one here will be affected but you and the deputy. Playing it safe, right?" He looked a bit ashamed. "Basically, that's the situation. They have nothing to use against you. If they look into your past, I doubt they would be foolish enough to threaten your father. They wouldn't find anything on your husband either. We will keep an eye on you. Think you can do it?" She smiled. "Let me see the file." Hardy wasn't in a great mood. His cousin and close friend had just visited, and the news wasn't good. They hugged and caught up on each other's lives. Harry was married with 2 sons. His wife was plain, but the love he had for her made her beautiful in his eyes. Harry had been Hardy's right-hand man during his younger, wilder days. He wasn't much of a planner, but was excellent at getting things done. He was loyal, dependable, and not afraid to speak up. They made a good team. When Hardy joined the military, another cousin, Roy, took over his position. Roy didn't have Hardy's style, but he was effective. Harry was facing a problem. Roy had been watching the armored car that serviced the local Walmart. His sources said it contained a lot of money, making it appealing. He had a plan and wanted Harry to be part of it. As he began to explain, Hardy interrupted him. "Wait a minute. I'm now an officer of the court. Don't tell me anything illegal. I have to report it," Hardy said. Harry's face fell a little at that. "But if you want to discuss a made-up situation and need my thoughts as a lawyer, I'd be happy to share." "Thanks, Hardy. I run a body shop and do well enough to support my family. I'm getting a bit old for risky plans like Roy's. If this were a real situation and these were the steps, do you think it would work?" Hardy considered the idea. "Anyone trying this would face at least 7 years in federal prison. It's like robbing a bank. This plan won't succeed. It takes too long. Those places have GPS, cameras, and alarms, plus they're much tougher now. If someone attempted this, they would need to be in and out in under 10 minutes, including taking care of the guards and getting away with the money. That's just not possible. Tell whoever thought of these plans to forget it and choose an easier target." "Thanks, Hardy. I appreciate it." They shook hands and Hardy handed Harry some cards. "Here, give these to any of the cousins if they run into trouble. Tell them to say I'm their lawyer and nothing more until I arrive, understand?" Harry decided against the job after hearing Hardy's advice. But Roy convinced 3 younger cousins to go ahead anyway. They were caught within an hour. Hardy managed to get them to admit guilt since they wouldn't turn on each other, claiming it was their own idea. Each received 7 to 10 years in federal prison. Roy was upset and sent a message to Hardy, telling him to stay out of his business. Hardy replied that Roy needed to stop making plans that led to trouble for the younger ones. Worried, Roy felt his crew was starting to doubt him. Things were not progressing well for him. A new competitor was appearing, his earnings were down, and he saw no good outcome ahead. On top of that, he felt Hardy was working against him. I need to teach Hardy a lesson, but if I harm Hildy or Joshua, the cousins not involved might retaliate. I wish I had some leverage. Ronnie Wilkes, his enforcer, lacked cleverness but made up for it with size and strength. He never liked Hardy because Hardy didn't seem afraid of him. Well, cousin, there's always his ex. They're not together anymore, but you know how Hardy feels about people crossing him. Roy scoffed. I'm not going all the way to Yankee Land for that. I need something closer. Ronnie grinned. You don't have to. She's an assistant district attorney right here in Jefferson County. Cousin Bertie told me, but I promised not to share it with anyone. She's going by her maiden name, Canaday. If we visit her, he might get the idea. Harry was listening and shared his thoughts. I think that's probably the worst idea you've ever had, Roy. They didn't call him hard-ass because he's easygoing. This could backfire and make you look foolish. Ronnie chuckled dismissively. He's old news. A lawyer? How tough can he be? I bet he's soft and can't even walk up the courthouse steps without gasping for breath. Harry actually laughed. Keep thinking that. I'll make sure to remember it. I've seen him. He's tougher than you think. But you'll find out soon enough. Don't blame me when this plan goes wrong. I'll be the one saying I told you so. He walked away, still chuckling. They kept an eye on her. She had a routine, always getting home around 6 and rarely going out. He couldn't believe how easily she let them in. They only needed to say they were cousins with a message from Hardy, and she invited them in without hesitation. Gwen was uneasy about the two men, but when they said their names and mentioned Hardy, she unlocked the door and welcomed them. It happened so quickly that she didn't have time to react. The larger man pulled her and restrained her to a kitchen chair, putting something in her mouth to keep her quiet. The older man took a seat across from her. Listen, I need some promises from your husband, and then we'll leave quietly. If he puts up any fight, things could get rough for you. I'll let Ronnie get to know you better if it comes to that. If I take the gag off, will you promise not to scream? I need you to talk so Hardy knows I'm really here with you. Understand? Now I'm going to call him. Just sit tight. She nodded. When the gag came off, she smiled, which made Roy uneasy. You know who my husband is, and you think this is a good idea? I hope he lets me watch when he finds you. And if you think I can call him, you're mistaken. I don't have any of his numbers. With more confidence than he felt, he assured her not to worry. He had the number. I'll put it on speaker so he can hear us. The phone rang 3 times. Hardy Wilkes. Hardy, this is Roy. I heard you've been getting into my business. I don't like that. I have someone here who wants to say hi. He held the phone up to her. Looking right at him, she spoke. Hardy, dear, I want you to teach them a lesson. Roy snatched the phone back. That's right. I'm here with your wife. We don't want this to get messy, do we? Why would it get messy, Roy? Great minds think alike. I heard you wanted to talk and came by your place. You have a lovely family. It was the first time she had seen a man look so pale. Now, Hardy, don't. Hardy interrupted him. Your wife makes delicious pie. I have a little surprise for you. Your daughter June is here with me, playing on the front porch. I had to come outside to get a good signal. She's quite lively for a 6-year-old. Here, June, tell your dad what I brought you. A child's cheerful voice chimed in. Daddy, guess what? Uncle Hardy brought us tickets to 6 Flags. They have rides and everything. He says we're going this weekend. Isn't he the best? Are you coming home soon, Daddy? That's enough, June. Let me talk to your dad. Can you ask your mom for another piece of that pecan pie? You could hear the little girl hurry off, calling for her mother. Roy spoke up, his voice shaky. Now, Hardy, let's keep this under control. Just be quiet, Roy. You need to spend more time with your family. Kids like June can grow up fast, and your oldest daughter, she's probably charming everyone. Be careful and pay attention. Beautiful girls can find themselves in tricky situations. Do you understand what I'm saying, Roy? Roy looked stunned, struggling to find his words. Gwen couldn't hold back. I think he understands you well enough. Good. Now it's time for you to go back to your family. You're going to 6 Flags this weekend, 3 days and 2 nights, all covered. A client gave me the tickets as a bonus, and I don't have anyone to take with me. I'll call June on Monday. If she doesn't say she had a great time, I'll be very upset. Trust me, you don't want to see me upset. And Roy, I know your work isn't my concern, and I'm not in that business anymore. But listen, my matters are mine, so don't interfere, okay? Until I get the divorce papers, she's still part of my life. If Ronnie is around, tell him if she mentions anything he did, he'll have a lot to worry about from me. There's nowhere he can hide or anyone to protect him. Got it? Finally, Roy found his voice again. Whatever you want, Hardy, you have it. I'm sorry we had this misunderstanding. If you need anything, just ask. Please, Hardy, leave my family alone. He sounded close to tears. Well, Roy, I'm glad we talked this out. Just remember, if June isn't happy this weekend, I'll come looking for you. And I'll take the rest of this pie home with me, if I can persuade your wife. Give your family a hug for me when you get home. You don't realize how lucky you are. Then the call ended. They were very careful as they helped her to sit comfortably. Please tell him we didn't mean any harm and that we didn't hurt you, please, she laughed. You guys are something else. If he had hesitated even a little, I'm sure my evening would have gone very badly. I'm going to tell him you pushed me around and that Ronnie let his hands stray. Tell me which place to send flowers for your service and then get out of my house. They rushed out the door. She leaned against it. So much for the redneck group that Hardy formed before going off to the military. He still loves me. He stood up for me and even scared a whole family. I got to hear from him. Overall, it was a good day. 6 months ago, that thought would have filled her with fear. She went to bed and slept soundly. She changed her clothes several times for the reunion. Hildy said they would be outside most of the day, so she should wear something light and comfortable. She finally chose a simple white top and green shorts. It seemed just right. Her hair and makeup were trickier. Since they would be outside, she kept her makeup light and styled her hair in a way that looked casual yet took effort. She found that she liked having shorter hair. It was much easier to manage than before. She practiced what she wanted to say if she got a chance to speak to him. They were cooking pigs, chickens, and even a big piece of beef. 4 cookers were busy when she arrived, and the smell was amazing. Joshua was looking for her. Hopefully he was happy to see her, but maybe it was the 5 cases of beer. St. Pauli, of course. She had introduced him to it, and he almost caused a stir when he said it was better than Bud. Hildy pulled her in, handed her an apron, and sent her to the kitchen. A chorus of "Hey, Aunt Gwen" greeted her, many of whom she was sure she had never met. They put her on the slaw line, and for 90 minutes she processed cabbage. The men were setting up tables and bringing out the side dishes. She kept looking for Hardy. Hildy noticed. Relax, he's coming. One of the cousins had a little trouble and he had to go help out. He'll be here soon. Why not freshen up? This kitchen isn't doing your hair any favors. So much for the simple look she aimed for. She finally gave up, combed her damp hair into a quick ponytail, and hoped for the best. Finally, they gathered for the blessing. You always have a blessing at these gatherings, whether you believe or not. A few cousins played in a band. They had set up a stage and handed the microphone to Hildy. I'm going to do my Minnie Pearl impression. Howdy! Her voice echoed off the hills. A chorus of howdy came back to her. She acted disappointed. Y'all forget, I'm related to you. I know you can get louder than that. We're not eating until I'm satisfied. Hello, everyone. They likely heard her greeting in the next town. That's much better. Thank you all for coming. Family is truly the best. Before we start eating, please make sure to thank the cooks. Some of them have been working for hours. And let's also thank the ladies for the delicious side dishes and lovely desserts. Now let's take a moment to remember those who can't be here and those who will never return. Keep them in your hearts. After a brief silence, she continued. God, thank you for our friends and family. We wouldn't be whole without them. Welcome to the new members of our family, and may the departed be close to you. Help those who are lost find their way home. Help those who are apart reunite with each other. Guide us to be better people. Bless this food and everyone here. Amen. A loud amen followed, and everyone rushed to the tables. Gwen stood, moved by the blessing, and then quietly said a prayer of her own, the most sincere one she had ever offered. Hildy gave her a hug. Come on, girl, before it's all gone. Gwen wasn't sure what she was eating. There was burgoo, which had mutton in it, brought by a cousin from Tennessee. Another dish, Brunswick stew from South Carolina, was tasty once you looked past its unusual appearance. There were countless homemade barbecue sauces from sweet to spicy. There were green beans, butter beans, black-eyed peas, lima beans, corn of all kinds, and a variety of greens. Sweet potato dishes lined the table too, along with potato salad, fried potatoes, hash browns, and many more veggies. She saw fried squash, okra, onions, tomatoes, and cucumbers. Pickles of every kind were available, as well as dishes filled with mystery ingredients. Gwen hoped the tables would hold up under all the food, and the desserts were incredible. There was carrot cake, chocolate cake, coconut cake, and many types of pies. She felt her waistline expand just by looking at all of it. Still, health concerns didn't stop anyone from enjoying the feast, so she took a plate and filled it up. They knew she was new to many of the dishes and made a show of introducing her to them. They encouraged her to try Cousin Fred's fried chicken and Aunt Zelda's carrot salad. The teasing grew as they warmed up to her. "Try this sauce, don't shy away. It's spicy, but drink some beer, it will help. Don't hurt her feelings, she should try it." Hildy jumped in to rescue her. "Calm down, or she'll be known as the girl who ate everything. She'll be here a while and can try more later. Let's not overwhelm her." Taking her hand, Hildy led her inside. "Hardy just called. He got caught up. He'll be here in about an hour. Why don't you make him a plate of his favorite food and put it away for him? That way you'll have a chance to chat when he arrives. Come on, I'll help you." They ended up preparing 3 plates, one with meats, one with vegetables, and one with dessert. Hildy smiled. Maybe the saying about love and food is true. Give him this and he'll be so full he won't be able to run and so happy he won't complain. Well, not too much, I hope. Gwen smiled too. She loosened the belt on her shorts. They had elastic, so she thought they would stay up. It was a choice she soon wished she hadn't made. An hour passed, but there was still no sign of Hardy. He called Hildy to say he didn't think he could get the cousin out in time to come over. Hildy insisted he stop by, if only for the food she had saved for him. He promised he would, but said it would be at least 2 more hours. The older folks rested, satisfied from the meal and family time. The younger ones tidied up a little before settling down to relax. The kids were lively, full of energy. Gwen and Hildy walked around, chatting with everyone. Gwen felt like she was campaigning for office, shaking hands and chatting, but she didn't mind. At some point, Hildy wandered off, and Gwen found herself walking with one of the cousins who was about her age. They joined a group near the creek and learned about the family's special drink, ginger fizz. It was a mix of homemade corn liquor and a local ginger ale that had a strong kick. It was definitely not for the faint of heart. Gwen tried a sip and it felt like her mouth was on fire. She turned pale and then bright red. When she started gasping for breath, the group erupted with laughter. "Don't worry, Aunt Gwen, it'll get better in a moment. Don't be upset with us. Everyone new to the family gets surprised like this. Here, try this, it's what it's supposed to taste like." She eyed the drink closely. It was made with the same base, but included slices of lemon, orange, and lime, plus a few cherries. She took a sip and enjoyed the flavor. She ended up finishing 3 drinks in an hour, unaware that they still contained a fair amount of liquor, and soon she was feeling quite warm. She went to the bathroom, chatted with Aunt Hildy, and learned that Hardy should arrive soon. She made her way back to the group by the creek, stopping to talk with friends along the way. Overall, she felt very happy. Seeing Hardy would make her wonderful day even better. The band started playing, mixing country tunes with classic rock. They sounded pretty good. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden light over everything. Then, everything changed. Crystal Ann was at a table with her new friends, chatting with a tall guy in a cap. She was laughing and playing with her hair. Seeing her was the last thing Gwen wanted. With her long red hair shining in the sun and wearing a white top and tiny shorts, she caught everyone's attention. At least she didn't have to deal with Hardy. Then everything changed. Crystal playfully knocked the cap off a guy, revealing his shaggy light blonde hair, which she affectionately ruffled. When she reached the table, the man turned, and she suddenly found herself looking right into Hardy's eyes. His hair was longer, and he had a short beard, but those cool gray eyes felt piercing. In that moment, she lost control. All her plans, all her dreams, and he was with her. She couldn't even remember how it all started. "Get your hands off my husband!" she shouted. In a rush of anger, Gwen grabbed Crystal's hair and pulled it backward. Crystal stumbled into her, throwing them both off balance and sending them into the creek. Joshua had dug out a little pool with a backhoe, meant for the younger kids in the summer. It was about waist deep at the deepest point. Gwen held on to Crystal's hair as they splashed into the cold water. Even though it was early September, the water was freezing. Crystal was struggling to get back on her feet. Gwen pulled her head under again, and as she gasped for air, she accidentally tore off Crystal's top. A crowd had gathered by now, and Gwen saw her chance to escape while Crystal crouched in the water trying to cover herself. Laughing, she climbed up the bank, twirling her top. Suddenly, Crystal surged out of the water, and some people later said she was yelling a storm. She grabbed Gwen by the waistband of her shorts, and because the belt was loose, the shorts slipped down, leaving her embarrassed. She had hoped to impress Hardy, always thinking he liked that style. Gwen slipped back into the water as Crystal gave her a strong slap. In return, Gwen scratched her neck, causing a small cut. They were both splashing around in the water. Somehow Gwen's top was half gone. She could hear the crowd cheering, but she couldn't care less. She was determined to stand her ground. Then a loud voice interrupted. "Stop this instant! Both of you should be ashamed!" To emphasize her point, Hildy grabbed a cooler and poured its contents over them, shocking them into silence. Hildy had clearly had enough. She looked at two of the bigger cousins. "Shirts off! Quickly!" They handed over their t-shirts. She tossed them to the girls. "Put these on and get to the house right now, or else I'm going to show everyone what a real confrontation looks like. Now!" The girls hurriedly put on the shirts and rushed toward the house, holding them down. Hildy followed closely behind. Joshua was waiting for them and ushered them inside. Soon, Hildy was pacing in front of them. "I hope you're proud. This will be a reunion everyone will remember for a long time." "What a way for two ladies to behave." It felt like they were children. Crystal Ann said, "She started it." Gwen replied, "No, you started it by being close to my husband. If I see you near him again, you won't like what I do." "Well, you let him go when you couldn't stay faithful. At least I would be loyal to him." That hurt Gwen more than she wanted to admit. "You should know he is still mine until the divorce is final. I want to stop the divorce so we can be together again. Just wait." Crystal smirked. "Sure, that will happen soon. Right after I get my ice cream stand in hell." "Enough! Crystal, go with Joshua. He will show you to my room. You can find some clothes to wear home. They might be a bit big, but they will have to do." Once Crystal left the room, Hildy looked at Gwen with sympathy. "Well, if you wanted to make a statement, you did." Gwen felt tears again. "Is he still here? Do you think he will listen to my apology?" "Sorry, dear, he's gone. You two really embarrassed him, and I didn't think that was possible." She cried, "I've messed up everything. One chance and I lost it. I might as well give up." Hildy comforted her gently. "Don't be so quick to give up. You actually stood up for him, and he will appreciate that. This situation might even work in your favor." Gwen hugged Hildy for a moment, then pulled back. With a small smile, she asked, "So, did I win?" Hildy smiled back. "I'd say it was a tie, but it was quite a show." Gwen let out a laugh. "What would my dad think if he saw me like this? I bet it would surprise him." Hildy looked a bit uneasy. "Sweetie, you should know." She paused and glanced over Gwen's shoulder. "What is it, Aunt Hildy?" Gwen heard someone clear their throat and thought Joshua was back. She turned around. "Daddy?" Yes, there he stood, Greg Canaday, a respected member of the Boston elite, looking stunned at his muddy daughter dressed in an oversized t-shirt. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited. Someone named Hildy told me how well you were doing and how much you missed me. So I thought I would come by, enjoy some southern food and hospitality." "Dad, it's not what it looks like. How do you know what it looks like?" "It looks like my daughter got into a fight with one of my employees. A real disagreement over a man. It really wasn't that bad. Not that bad? You two were rolling around in mud and water in front of at least 100 people. It looked like something from TV. Dad, I'm really sorry." "Sorry? Is that how a good member of Boston society acts? Oh, come on." He burst out laughing, shaking with joy. Hildy came back into the room, smiling at first, but soon she was laughing with him. "Wow, I send you down here and you really let loose. Your grandmother would be proud." She was very confused. "What does my grandmother have to do with this?" "Your grandmother is from Jefferson County. You have some Alabama roots. Virginia Howe from the Birmingham Hows. Your grandfather worked in our office and fell in love with her. Her parents were not happy." "A Yankee! How could she?" But they loved each other until he died 27 years later. She was never the same after that. That's where your trust fund comes from, old money. She would definitely be proud of you today. But why would she be proud? I embarrassed myself and pushed Hardy further away. I just made things worse. Maybe not, Hildy said. Hardy just called to check on you. He also said if any videos show up, people will pay for it. I can imagine there are a lot of things being deleted right now. Gwen's hand flew to her mouth. Her shining moment could be out there forever. It just couldn't get any more complicated. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Her dad spent 4 days with her, watching her at court, taking her to meals. He spent some time with his old friend Paul, talking about things they wouldn't share with anyone else. He had to admit she had grown up a bit. It was really nice to see. The only problem between them was Hardy. He couldn't understand why she wanted him back. To him, she had hurt Hardy twice, no matter what happened. Look at it this way, sweetie. Have you ever heard that story about the woman and the snake? She shook her head. In the story, a woman finds a cold snake that has fallen from a wall. The snake begs her to take him in so he can survive. He talks beautifully, and she believes he is charming, so she picks him up and brings him home. She warms him up by the fire and cares for him. Eventually, summer comes, and the snake no longer needs her. One day, while she holds him, he bites her neck. As she lies there hurt, she asks, "Why? I helped you. Why would you bite me?" The snake just looks at her and slithers away. You knew he was trouble before you helped him. He paused. Do you get it? You knew Alan was trouble, but you still spent time with him in Paris. You still let him into your life while trying to get Hardy back. What happened to you was unfair, but you knew what he was like before you welcomed him in. So please, take some responsibility. And that's exactly how Hardy sees it. You let someone untrustworthy into your life, knowing what he could be like. She sighed. Am I going to get him back? He didn't want to tell her, but she needed to hear the truth. I don't think so. You hurt him deeply. It's true that you didn't know his past and how he would react, but you still betrayed him. Be honest with yourself. How did you treat him before everything fell apart? I always respected him, she replied, trying to defend herself. But you took him for granted. I think you believed his love for you would help you get through anything. Even with betrayal? No! You know I didn't intend for that to happen, and I never wanted him to find out. Regardless, it happened, and he discovered the truth. Deep down, you might have thought that if he found out, you could convince him to forgive you. She couldn't meet his gaze. That said everything he needed to know. He sighed. There's more news. Hardy is tired of dragging this divorce on. He's told his lawyer that unless things start moving, he will find someone new. Ivan is trying his best, but he can't delay for much longer. She felt weak. It was finally coming to an end. She just looked down and cried. Greg left the next day and stopped by to see Hardy on his way out. How are you? Hardy answered with a grunt. Doing as well as I can. Lots of cases to go through. A lot of people needing help. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Are you still moving forward with the divorce? Of course I am. Is there anything that could change your mind? She's really matured over the past 8 months. I believe she cares for you. I still love her. Maybe I always will. But love isn't always enough. I need to trust her, and that trust is broken. It's not just about the betrayal. I feel she was dishonest from the start. She didn't want what I wanted, even when we talked about it, and she agreed. She didn't want to settle down or have kids. The best thing for me is to move on. I still want a family, and time is running out. I understand, but tell me, was all you really wanted just someone to start a family with? In my view, you both began your marriage on misunderstandings. You should have been honest about your past and what you wanted. She should have shared her feelings about starting a family honestly. She made mistakes, but you also have to take some blame. If you both had been truthful, you might never have married and wouldn't be in this situation now. Hardy opened his mouth to respond, but Greg interrupted. Stop! I'm sorry for what I said. You're like family to me. You're the son I never had, and I regret losing you. I shouldn't have brought it up. What I really wanted to discuss is the new case that Gwen is working on. He explained the risks she might face. Paul promised me she'd be safe, but with how busy law enforcement is right now, I'm worried. Could you keep an eye on her? I know you have connections that are really helpful. Gwen mentioned your talk with your cousin Roy. Hardy smiled at the memory. The next week, he received a call from little June, who talked excitedly about everything. Her mother promised him that she would bake him many pies for helping Roy understand how important a happy family is. I'm not stupid. I grew up hearing stories about you. Whenever Roy seems a little distracted, I just say we should bake you a pie, and he perks right up. Thanks. By the way, do you like peaches? Cousin Ronnie was different. He had made some bold claims, and Hardy had seen him boasting in a local hangout that was as hot as an oven, where there was no air conditioning and drinks were served on ice. When Ronnie saw Hardy, he made a mistake. He started bragging about what he would do to him. Hardy slapped him hard and turned to leave, calling back, "Come on outside. I won't hit you, but I'll teach you a lesson until you stop talking so much." Ronnie had enough to drink and lost his cool. He charged at Hardy, shouting loudly, "I'm going to get you!" Hardy didn't seem concerned. He stepped aside and gave Ronnie a light shove as he went by, causing him to fall onto the gravel. Jumping back up, Ronnie was furious. Instead of avoiding him, Hardy moved in and bumped heads with him, catching Ronnie off guard. His nose was hurt, and blood started to flow. Stunned, Ronnie stood there while Hardy took advantage of the moment and began hitting him across the face. Tears formed from the pain. "Wow!" someone in the crowd shouted. "He's really upset now." This only fueled Ronnie's anger. He had skills, but he was not at Hardy's level. He managed to throw some punches, but Hardy barely reacted. Instead, he focused on hitting Ronnie in places that caused him a lot of discomfort. Eventually, Ronnie couldn't take it anymore. He collapsed onto the gravel, barely conscious. Hardy grabbed him by his shirt, lifting him easily, and pushed him against a truck. "You've cried and wet yourself. Should I give you a little punishment, or do we have an agreement?" Ronnie nodded in defeat. "We're almost finished here. Remember what I said would happen if you got too close to my girlfriend?" Ronnie's eyes widened, and he tried to respond despite his injuries. Hardy interrupted him. "Be quiet. It's time to face the music." His hand moved, revealing a small knife. Ronnie's eyes filled with genuine tears, not from pain. Hardy rested the knife against Ronnie's little finger and grinned. Ronnie heard a loud crack and felt intense pain, but when he looked, his finger was still there, just bent awkwardly. Hardy slid the knife back into his pocket. "If I hear you're near her again, I'll return, and it will be even worse. Got it?" Ronnie nodded. Hardy surveyed the crowd. "Does anyone have something to say?" People suddenly found the ground, the sky, and everything else interesting except him. "Okay, then. One of you should take him to Doc Thomas. He knows how to handle this and won't tell anyone. I'd be grateful. Just have him send me the bill." "Have a good evening." He climbed into the large truck he had bought when he returned and kicked up gravel as he drove off, scattering it over Ronnie. This moment broke Ronnie. No one feared him anymore. His influence as an enforcer vanished. Roy chose one of the younger cousins back from Iraq to take his place. Ronnie became a messenger, doing small jobs for the group. He plotted and brooded, focusing his life on finding ways to hurt Hardy Wilkes. Doc Thomas turned out to be the grandfather of Karen Thomas, an assistant district attorney. He confidentially informed her that hard-ass Wilkes was back, tougher than ever, which meant more work for him. Later, she asked Gwen if she had met Ronnie Wilkes. Gwen grimaced. "Yes, he and a man named Roy visited me not long ago trying to connect. I can't say I liked either of them. I doubt they'll return." Karen smiled. "You probably won't see Ronnie again. Someone who looked a lot like your husband had quite the showdown with him recently. He's left bruised and hurt with a broken finger. They said the guy just slapped him until he cried and then hit him a few times, making him wet himself. Too bad he didn't finish the job. Ronnie's just a troublesome person." Gwen smiled as she said this, and the look in her eyes made Karen uneasy. Hardy reassured Greg that he would keep an eye on her. "I have a few cousins looking for work. They will take care of her." Greg offered to pay the cousins for their help, but Hardy dismissed the idea. "You can't charge family for things you would do for them anyway. That's not how we do things in my family," Greg replied. "Don't think of it as payment. Just say it's for their expenses. I want them focused on her, not worrying about money." Hardy agreed, saying he would manage it. Greg changed the topic. "While we're discussing money, I have some papers for you to sign. Remember that agreement you were against? It still stands, even if you don't end up divorcing. You have proof of her unfaithfulness. She has admitted it. She was true for most of 2 years, but now the total is 38 million. Before you say anything, this is legal and it's yours. If you don't want it, you can give it away. Just remember, you can't return it to Gwen. Hardy expressed his frustration, but Greg only smiled. You have no choice. You're rich now. Welcome to the club. They had a quiet dinner, each lost in their own thoughts, and Hardy drove him to the airport. The first meeting with Raul Escobar and his team of lawyers went as expected. They argued about everything from being tricked to bad police conduct, insisting all charges be dropped and their client be freed immediately. Raul sat there with a confident smile. She listened quietly as they presented their demands, and then laughed. He got caught driving under the influence. It's all on video, including his angry outburst at the officer. This is his first offense in the U.S., but it's serious. He'll face at least 5 to 7 years if he takes a plea. If he fights it, he could get much more. The choice is his. Let me know soon. She stood up and left them looking shocked. Don Vincente was furious when he heard. Who did she think she was? He planned to take her down. He arranged for his private jet and flew to Birmingham. He didn't like to leave things to chance and did his homework on anyone he saw as a threat. What he found didn't make him happy. The woman was already wealthy and money wouldn't convince her. Threats wouldn't work either. Her mother lived in France with a French judge, and her father was even richer and very respected. Her soon-to-be ex-husband had a past as a thug and was now a lawyer with connections that made him very dangerous. He requested a meeting with her and her boss. At first, he tried to appeal to her. Please, he said using his charm. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He didn't even know there were drugs in the car he borrowed. Let me take care of him and reduce the charges so he can get probation. I will ensure he lives a good life filled with proper actions. I will also send you monthly drug tests. You should know what those are. Gwen flushed with embarrassment. How did he find out about the drug tests? First off, he rented the car. He didn't just borrow it. His name is on the rental paperwork. His fingerprints are all over the bags, and we found his saliva in one of them. He fought against his arrest, then tried to bribe the officers, and even made threats using your name. Even if we wanted to drop this case, the deputy involved is trained and certified by Homeland Security. He has federal authority. If we let this go, the federal agents would take him away in no time. Cut your losses, Mr. Escobar. No lawyer can help him now. Let him admit to his actions. Vincente Escobar was used to having great power. Everyone south of the border feared him. Even other cartels stayed away. And now this young woman was saying he could not help his own nephew. She needed to learn, and he had just the way to teach her. Paul was upset after the meeting. That arrogant man. How dare he try to control us or suggest what might happen next? He needs a reality check. Gwen was calm. Relax, Paul. I've dealt with his kind many times in negotiations. They truly believe their way is best for everyone. He'll soon see this isn't like things are in his world. Still, none of the people I faced in business disputes had a record of hurting those who opposed them, so we must be cautious. The atmosphere at the office was tense for a few days. Raul had been in front of a judge, denied bail again, and was scheduled for trial in 3 months. Gwen returned to her usual work. Drug dealers, thieves, and others needed her help. She settled cases where she could and set trials for those she couldn't. Paul started letting her manage the simpler cases for experience. She lost one early on due to a minor mistake, leaving her feeling embarrassed and determined to learn. If any arresting officer made even a small error, she was ready to challenge them. Her reputation for being tough grew, but her outcomes spoke for themselves. One lighter moment came when she needed to interview a man who had harmed one of his workers. Homer Johnson was full of himself, overweight and unkempt. Weighing around 400 pounds, his lack of cleanliness was well known. She had to hold back her reaction when she entered the interview room. He was too stingy to hire a lawyer, so the least experienced public defender had been assigned to him. Gwen walked into the room and saw the man. He looked like he was feeling unwell. He smiled at her, showing his gold teeth. Not wanting to waste more time, she got straight to the point. We have 3 witnesses who are willing to speak up. The woman involved has filed a complaint. You have a record, Mr. Johnson, for hurtful behavior toward women. You can take a deal and serve 6 months, or you could face longer time in prison. If you give me any trouble, you might be looking at 18 months to 3 years, And I can guess, Mr. Johnson, that prison food won't taste great to you, nor will their strict rules." The public defender laughed, which made Big Daddy very angry. He stared at her. "You're supposed to help me. Get me out of this mess." The young woman shrank back, and then he turned to Gwen. "I know you. I had some issues with your husband in the past. He cost me some good opportunities. I always thought I'd get back at him." He looked at her in a way that made her uncomfortable. "Maybe I'll take you under my wing. A pretty woman like you could get used to things after a few years. I could make good money before then. What do you think your husband would say about that?" He leaned back, feeling proud of himself. Gwen's sweet smile surprised him. "If your past with my husband was tough, I bet he came out on top. I hear he's a lot stronger now, and trust me, he isn't as easygoing as he used to be. I might just have to share your comments with him. Or maybe I'll forget the deal and deal with you myself. You'd be in for a few rough years, but there will be others who would be happy to find you. Who knows? Maybe you can teach some folks a thing or two when you get out. Good day, Mr. Johnson. I hope you enjoy your new situation." The public defender hurried after her. "He wants the deal and said he was just joking about everything. Tell him it's 1 year now, take it or leave it." She kept walking. "He'll take it." Then she hugged Gwen, catching her by surprise. "Thanks, Aunt Gwen. I learned a lot in there." Gwen was amazed. "Your name is Chapman, right?" "Yes, ma'am. Grandpa Hardy was my great-aunt's brother-in-law. My grandmother on my father's side is a Howe. You're connected to most of the Chapmans, Grants, and Wilsons around here in some way." "It's not just the Wilkes family, you know." "Oh, no," Gwen thought, walking back to her office. "I'm probably related to everyone in the state somehow." Paul caught up with her. "Got a minute?" She smiled. "You're my boss. You think I'd tell you to leave?" He wasn't sure whether to laugh, but he followed her into her office. "Gwen, we have another case for you while we wait for the Escobar trial. This one's a bit complicated. Karen and I are tied up with murder trials, so you're up for this one. Come on, you're holding something back. What makes this one so special?" She didn't like the way he was avoiding the topic. "It involves the three-strike law. The person charged is Sam Wilkes." "You know I'll do my best, even if it turns out he's linked to my husband, right?" Paul quickly assured her. "We know. The twist is that his defense lawyer is going to use this case to challenge the three-strike law. He has a knack for turning tough cases around." "I don't mind. It will make it more interesting. What's his name? Maybe I've heard of him." "Oh, you have, trust me. His name is Hardy Wilkes." Gwen's face lost color. Hardy, her. Two sides in the same case. Could she manage her feelings? Could she sit next to him for days without falling apart? Could she do her job well for the state? A calmness settled over her. "Can you take this? Sarah has 5 more weeks of maternity leave, and Jimmy is still recovering from his softball injury. I just don't have anyone else." "Don't worry, Paul. I'll handle it. Now he has to talk to me." He looked relieved. "Great. Here's the file. The kid doesn't deserve this, but the law is clear. Good luck." The file read like a warning. Sam Wilkes was 23 years old. He had his first charge at 18 for joyriding with his cousins. Even though he wasn't driving and wasn't in the car when they took it, he was still there when the police arrived. He got probation for a Class D felony. His second charge came at 20, again thanks to his cousins during a bar fight. He hit someone, causing serious injuries. The jury had some sympathy, but he served 6 months for a Class B felony. 2 months ago, he was caught for stealing a car from his employer, a rare Mercedes. He was apprehended the next day and claimed he was going to return it. The car was valued at over $100,000, which made it a Class A felony. 3 strikes, life in prison, no chance for negotiation. The thought made her feel really upset. But she had to follow the law because she promised to do so. He was out on bail since it was a non-violent crime. He was living with Hardy. Hardy was deep in thought. He didn't see many options for Sammy. The 3 strikes law was made after a lot of crime during a past government. It was popular for a while, but lately people were starting to change their minds. The high cost of keeping people in prison for years, the increased fighting among inmates, and cases like Sammy's had made the legal system very frustrated. There was talk about changing the law to help non-violent offenders, but nothing had actually happened. Much depended on choosing the jury. Hardy knew if enough everyday people who didn't trust the system were selected, he might have a chance. There was a slim hope he could help Sammy avoid a long sentence. He hoped the assistant district attorney, Jimmy Richards, would be easy to work with. A long trial wouldn't help anyone. Monday morning was gloomy. The weather was turning chilly and rainy as winter approached in central Alabama. Hardy thought it was a perfect day to fight for a life as he, Sammy, Crystal Ann, and an assistant hired for jury analysis walked into the courthouse. Once in the courtroom, they set up their things at their table. Strangely, the assistant district attorney hadn't arrived yet. Usually, the two sides talked a bit before the judge came in, but today there would be no time for that. Judge Harlan was a surprise. At 74, he had been retired for a few years, but sometimes helped out with minor trials when other judges were unavailable. He enjoyed it, saying it kept his mind sharp and helped him appreciate retirement. He had been called in quickly when the judge meant to hear the case got into trouble due to an inappropriate deal with a defendant. The judge quietly stepped down, admitting to serious misconduct. He was able to avoid jail time, but would face other consequences. Soon he would be divorced and facing financial troubles. The judge entered the room quickly, surprising everyone. The bailiff called the court to order. "Don't stand up, I'm a bit early, let's get right to it. Please call the first case, bailiff. In the matter of the State versus Samuel Jerome Wilkes grand theft auto, is the defendant and counsel present?" Hardy stood up. "We are here. Wilkes for the defense. Good morning, Your Honor." There was a glimmer of recognition in the judge's eye. He and Hardy had known each other for a long time. He was the judge who once helped Hardy avoid a criminal record by suggesting he join the military. "I'm well. It's nice to see you again, Mr. Wilkes. I'm happy to see you have a job, even if it is as a defense lawyer." The judge was known for not liking defense lawyers and had a low opinion of their work. The judge frowned when he noticed the empty table usually set for the prosecution. "Is the prosecution here?" "No, Your Honor," the bailiff replied, looking through his papers. "It should be Jimmy Richards, but he was in an accident. The state will be represented by—" He paused, just as someone spoke from the back of the courtroom. "Gwen Cannaday for the state, Your Honor. Sorry I'm late, but you started a bit early." Time seemed to freeze for Hardy. There she was, looking professional and just as lovely as he remembered. He had only seen her once from afar since the picnic, and it still hurt to see her again. He hurried to the judge. "Your Honor, may I approach the bench regarding this change?" The judge noticed Hardy's expression when Gwen entered, and motioned for them to come forward. Being close to her took his breath away. He could smell her familiar perfume. He struggled to find the right words. The judge's patience wore thin. "You asked for this, so speak up. What's going on?" "Judge, I'd like to request another prosecutor for this case. It might be a bit uncomfortable." "Why would it be uncomfortable? Somebody better explain quickly." Gwen managed a small smile. "What Mr. Wilkes isn't saying, sir, is that we are husband and wife. We may not live together, but we are still legally married. I will do my best to be professional in these proceedings. If he feels uneasy, he can withdraw so that his client is properly represented." The judge replied firmly. "Mr. Wilkes, your words better be respectful and calm. You're acting like you're about to explode. This is my courtroom, and you both need to behave or there will be consequences. Do we understand each other, Mr. Wilkes?" "Yes, sir," he replied, struggling to keep his composure. "Miss Cannaday, do you understand?" She smiled back. "Yes, sir. And just to clarify, I know quite well how he can be—" "Wow," the judge thought. "We haven't even started, and it's already getting interesting. This could be entertaining." He made a note to learn more about the couple before him, and then banged his gavel for jury selection to begin. Gwen quickly understood the process of selecting jurors. She argued well, getting a few tough-minded people past Hardy, while he included some who had different views. In the end, most were just ordinary people, which could benefit Hardy. An undecided jury could work in his favor. The first day of the trial set the stage for what was to come. The media and legal groups were paying close attention to the case. When news spread that it was a husband against his wife, it drew even more interest. The case took a turn when the plea was entered. "Not guilty" echoed in the room. This was expected, but he surprised some people when he asked to have the charges dropped, claiming the defendant had permission to use the car, so it couldn't be said to be stolen. Sam captured the sympathy of the crowd, even if he didn't win over the jury. He was nervous and tearful, making him a hard witness for everyone. "Yes, ma'am," he replied when she asked if he had taken the car. "Did the car owner know you had it?" "No, ma'am." "So if he didn't know you took it, that means you took it without permission, right?" Hardy jumped to his feet. "Objection! That's leading, Your Honor." "Objection sustained. Be careful, Mrs. Cannaday," the judge warned. "Noted, Your Honor," she replied. She turned to the jurors. "He admitted he took the car. He admitted that the owner didn't know he had it. Think about that," she stated. Turning back to the judge, she said she had no further questions. She looked at Hardy. "Your witness, Mr. Wilkes." With a smile, Hardy stood up. "Thank you, Miss Cannaday." He focused on Sammy, who looked down in fear. "Sammy, look at me," he urged. Sam raised his head. "Sammy, did you take the car?" "Yes, sir, I did." "Why?" "Because it was dirty. It was such a nice car, a classic. It should have been taken care of and cleaned well." "What did you do when you took it besides cleaning it? Did you drive it around? Where were you going when they caught you?" Jimmy looked shocked. "I never even went fast. They knew I had it. I called Will, the owner's son, and told him I had cleaned it and was bringing it back. He got upset and said his dad had called the police because they didn't know who had it. He promised to call them back to say it wasn't stolen." He turned to the judge. "I would like to present the phone call as evidence." He glanced at Gwen, who nodded in agreement. She had already heard it. "Hello, Jefferson County Sheriff Department." "Hi, this is Will Landis. My father reported his Mercedes stolen yesterday. I just found out it wasn't stolen. Jimmy, the guy who helps us on the farm, took it home to clean it. He joked about it, but I didn't know he meant to take it. Anyway, he's on his way back with it now." "Are you withdrawing the stolen car report?" "Yeah, I guess I am. Sammy wouldn't steal anything. He just isn't always careful." "All right, sir. I'll withdraw the report. Have a good day." "Thanks. Goodbye." He paused for a moment in silence before turning back to Sammy. "Tell me, how did you get in trouble if they knew you were bringing it back?" "I got stopped right after I talked to Will. Nobody knew it wasn't stolen, and they arrested me. I kept trying to explain, but they didn't listen. Eventually, they told me to be quiet and call my lawyer. So as soon as I got to jail, I called you." "Why did you call me?" He looked surprised by the question. "Because you're my cousin, and I trust you. You're the only lawyer I know." This made a few people in the room smile and chuckle. "No more questions, Your Honor." The judge checked his watch. "It's 3:30. Would you like to stop early and prepare your final statements?" Gwen asked if she could make her final statement first. "I promise it will be short. We might even finish both sides before 5. May I go ahead?" The judge agreed. She stood and walked in front of the jurors. "Ladies and gentlemen, Sammy seems like a nice person. I believe he wouldn't intentionally hurt anyone. No offense to him, but he isn't the most clever person. I think he meant well. He probably never wanted to keep the car. If he had thought it through a bit more, he would have realized his friend Will was joking when he said he could clean the car when it got really dirty." She paused, and the jurors could see she felt sad. "But the truth is, he did take it. Will is only 16. He had no right to make decisions about that car. It belonged to his father, and his father insisted we take action. So we did." Sammy has definitely faced many challenges in his life. Lack of support, poor choices, and situations he couldn't control have led him here today. That said, his mistakes brought him here. He has felony convictions, and this is his 3rd offense if he is found guilty. The law says 3 strikes and you're out, which means a serious penalty this time. The law existed before I came to this state, but, ladies and gentlemen, it is the law, and as a member of the court, I must see it followed. If you can, please show mercy. I feel a lot for him. You see, I have my own heavy burden to bear." She paused, and the judge frowned. He and Hardy were unsure of where she was going. "Many of you know that the defense attorney is my husband. We are apart, but still married. I made a serious mistake that stained our relationship. I betrayed him and everything he values. It's been almost a year, and he hasn't spoken to me since. I've tried every legal option I can think of to reach out and ask for another chance. I'm almost out of hope. So by my own actions, I've trapped myself in a life without hope or happiness. Though it's not the same, I feel a lot of sympathy for this young man. I've done my job. I've shared the facts as they are. I've explained the main points of the punishment, and the judge will go over the details with you. All I ask is that you find a way to show some mercy for a young man who doesn't deserve to spend his life in prison. Thank you for your service, and may God guide you in your decisions." She looked at the judge as tears ran down her face. "Thank you, Your Honor. The prosecution rests." A heavy silence filled the room before the judge brought his gavel down sharply. "Miss Cannaday, I don't know whether to praise you or criticize you. Don't think I'm overlooking your clever move at the end. That was your one chance. If you try something like that again, there will be consequences. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor, I apologize." "All right then." He glanced at his watch. "Court is adjourned until 9 tomorrow morning." Gwen left, not daring to look at Hardy. If she had, she would have seen him sitting with his head in his hands, struggling to hold back tears. "Good morning, Your Honor, Counselor. Members of the jury. Yesterday you heard my opponent's emotional closing argument, appealing to facts and feelings. I agree with her on many important points. The three-strike law does not offer true justice. It fits the definition of cruel and unusual punishment. I see how it might apply to a few very dangerous offenders, but sending a 23-year-old away for life for cleaning a car is simply wrong. Look at him, ladies and gentlemen. He is terrified. 12 people he has never seen before now have the power of life or death over him. If he goes to prison, he will hope for miracles the first couple of years. By the 5th year, his spirit will begin to fade, and by the 10th, he could become someone who doesn't even know how to live in the outside world. By then, he would be 33, facing at least 40 more years of this. Yes, he took the car, but he thought he had permission. The teenager was willing to say he led him to believe that he could wash it. He was almost back with the car when he got stopped. If the dad hadn't been so upset about someone driving his prized possession, the charges would likely have been dropped. He's a good kid, not ready to handle adult life. He took the car and admitted it, but this is just a small mistake that has grown too big. Find him guilty of something, but don't ruin the life of someone who is essentially good. Think about the cost. On average, it costs about $30,000 a year to care for a prisoner. As they get older, healthcare costs increase. Sammy will probably live at least 50 more years. That could amount to $1, 2 to $1, $6 million in expenses for punishing him for cleaning a car without permission. Think about all the good things that money could bring, like better roads, new schools, and programs to help people. Does this law make more sense to you now? He turned back to address the judge and jury one last time. With your permission, Your Honor, my opponent made some good points. She may feel trapped, but she is a young woman with a bright future, beautiful and wealthy. She could easily fly to Paris for lunch and be back home for dinner. It wouldn't cost her much more than what it would for one of us to grab a meal at a local diner. Sammy won't have that freedom. When the doors close, his future is set. While she worries about fashion choices, he'll be worrying about surviving each day. That's quite a difference, wouldn't you agree? And if Sammy doesn't end up in prison for life, he'll face his own difficulties. He and I are both serving our own sentences. For him, it involves a stolen vehicle. For me, it involves a woman. We knew these things were beyond our reach, but for a moment, we wanted to hold on, even if it caused us pain. That's our life sentence, remembering the brief happiness of holding something so precious, while knowing deep down it can never truly be ours. Thank you, jury, for your time. I don't envy you the decision you have to make. The defense rests, Your Honor. She thought to herself, if I had $1 for every tear I cried for you, Hardy, I would be rich. No one spoke of her tears as the jury listened to their instructions before leaving the room. 5 hours later, the jury returned with a verdict. Sammy was found guilty of illegal use of a vehicle, a minor charge. He received a 6-month sentence in a low-security facility that cared for state vehicles. The judge thought it was appropriate. Hardy had Sammy thank everyone in the room, including the jurors, the judge, and even Gwen, who surprised everyone by giving him a hug. The entire courtroom watched quietly as Gwen approached Hardy to shake his hand. He accepted it without pause. You did well, counselor. Justice happened today. And just so you know, I've decided to stop fighting the divorce. Take your freedom. I won't hold you back. Just understand, if I could see any chance for us to be together again, I would plead with you. Goodbye, Hardy. I care about you." The judge observed this moment, sensing it wasn't right. Everyone but Hardy seemed to recognize the situation. He realized he needed to look into their pasts more carefully. Greg wondered what the Alabama judge wanted. He had left a message saying a return call was urgent. Greg figured it had to do with Hardy or Gwen. He wasn't too worried about Hardy, but he was genuinely concerned about Gwen. She had called him and asked him to tell Ivan to just let things go. It was finally over. He could hear the sadness and resignation in her voice. "Are you sure, honey? I know he still cares about you, but he won't admit it." "It doesn't matter if he cares about me anymore, Dad. He will never forgive me. Every time he looks at me, I know he sees Alan and I together. He can't forgive me, and I can't go on living like this." He felt deep sadness for Hardy, Gwen, and even for himself. He had really hoped they would get back together. He dialed a number, and an older man answered. "Good evening, this is Greg Canaday returning a phone call. Finally, I was about to lose hope." The judge sounded impatient. "You don't know me, but I know your daughter and your soon-to-be ex-son-in-law pretty well. I presided over her last case, and I was glad to see she was actually happy she lost. Did you follow it?" Greg had, and there were already articles calling for changes to the three-strike law appearing in newspapers throughout Alabama. Even some conservative ones were grudgingly admitting that changes had some merit. There were several photos of Hardy and Gwen in the local papers. "Yes, I did. I was proud of them both." "Good. Listen, son, I'm 74, and I don't have much time left. Before I go, I want one last chance to do something good. Those kids need to stay together, no matter how much they fight it. I have an idea. Are you willing to help me?" Greg thought about it. Did they really need to stay together? Did he even have the right to interfere more than he already had in their lives? Yes and no, but that wouldn't stop him. "I'm in, Judge. What do you have in mind?" He listened, and his smile grew wider. He couldn't wait to meet the judge in person. His plan might not work, but it would be fun to see. He flew down on Friday and spent the weekend with the judge. After discussions, Hildy and Joshua were brought in. Ideas were proposed, talked about, changed, or dropped until they finally had a plan they could agree on. Hildy summed it up best. "Well, I expect things will be lively next week." Greg stopped by to see Gwen, surprising her by taking her to the best restaurant in Birmingham. "Honey, I can't tell you how proud I am of you. I had serious doubts when I sent you down here, but you have proven me wrong in many ways. You're not a pampered girl anymore. You're a mature woman and a great attorney." He didn't realize how much his praise meant to her. It validated her hard work and determination to be better. "Thank you, Daddy. It means so much to hear that." He felt a bit awkward, surprised that his approval was so important to her. "That being said, Gwen, I'm letting you off your promise. Come back to Boston whenever you're ready. My partners and I believe you'll be even more valuable than before you left. Plus, I've made your trust fund available again. You can use it whenever you need." She sat there, tears streaming and a mix of feelings on her face. With determination, she replied in a way that filled his heart with pride. "Thanks, Dad, but I still owe Paul 10 more weeks. Honestly, I kind of like it here. Let me access the trust fund when I return. I don't need the money right now. Can I decide after the Escobar trial?" "Gwen, you're an adult now. Do what you feel is best. If you choose to stay here for good, I would be sad, but I would support you. I love you." She sniffled again. "I've cried so much this past year that everyone here thinks I'm related to a famous TV personality." He gave her a moment to collect herself. "Gwen, I've wished many times that I hadn't intervened in your marriage, but I have something to share with you. This is entirely up to you. You don't know how many friends you have here. So many people call me Uncle Greg that I can hardly keep track. It feels good to have such a big family, doesn't it?" She nodded. 2 people had already greeted her in the restaurant, calling her Aunt Gwen. She had given up trying to remember them all. "Go on, Dad. What tricky plan have you come up with to make my life even more complicated?" He explained his idea. She was surprised at first, but then her lawyer instincts kicked in, and she saw the benefits of his plan. On Monday, she started putting the plan into action. By Friday, everything was set. "Good grief!" Hardy shouted. He had received divorce papers right on the courthouse steps. Gwen had managed to get a local judge to move the case from Boston to Birmingham, since they both lived in that state. There was also a court date set, with grounds listed as infidelity. He called his lawyer back in Boston, venting his frustrations. "I thought this was all settled. The final paper was due in 2 weeks. What's going on?" "You've got me there. The only thing I know is that I received a notice to change the venue, and the judge approved it." Honestly, he seemed eager to wash his hands of the whole situation. "I heard about a divorce case in Florida that took over a year, and it involved 2 lawyers. This one will probably break records for speed. Believe it or not, those 2 ended up remarrying. Good luck, Hardy. You'll see my bill soon." They were back to square one. He had no option but to hire a new lawyer and start the whole process again. As the first court date approached, his lawyer insisted he attend. In fact, the judge wanted them both there. He resisted the idea but eventually gave in. "I don't know what to tell you, he's very firm about this. The usual judge is out on medical leave. This one has a reputation for being tough. It's best not to upset him." That should have been a clue, but he was too preoccupied to notice. He stood on the courthouse steps with his lawyer waiting to go inside. Gwen and her lawyer arrived, standing on the steps somewhat close yet still apart. She nodded to him but didn't say a word. Hardy was shocked when the judge walked into the courtroom. A heavy sensation settled in his stomach. It was Judge J.T. Harlan. Once the initial matters were addressed, he called the first case. "Wilkes v. Wilkes, Your Honor." "All right, who would like to begin?" Gwen and her lawyer quickly responded. "We will, Your Honor. Instead of opening statements, I would like Mrs. Wilkes to make a statement." The judge looked over his glasses, focusing intently on Gwen. "Go ahead. Your Honor, I want to take back my petition." His lawyer had to gently push him back into his seat. The judge fixed his gaze on him. "Listen, if you cause any trouble, I'll delay this for 6 months. Do you understand?" Hardy nodded, feeling heavy. "I expect a clear answer." It came out almost like a growl. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand." "Good. Now, Mrs. Wilkes, go on." "I want to take back my petition, Your Honor." "Why is that?" "Because I still want to be married to Mr. Wilkes." "You'll need to do better than that. From what I know, you are separated because of trust issues. Why hold on to him?" "I can't stop loving him, Your Honor. I really tried. Even when I agreed to the divorce, I thought it was what he needed, but being apart made me realize so much. The more I understand, the more I want to keep my marriage. I've struggled in many areas of my life. I wasn't a good daughter or a supportive wife. I was dishonest about my expectations and tried to control him to keep him close. I didn't understand the man he was. In that way, I was as much to blame for the dishonesty and control. If I had known more about him, I might not have chased him. I thought he was gentle, maybe too soft. I lost respect for him, and my actions led to a painful situation. It was through tough times that I finally saw who he truly is. Even when he had the chance to be violent, he showed remorse after the one instance." Judge Harlan listened carefully and believed her words. "Tell me, Mrs. Wilkes, do you think he can love you again? You have caused him a lot of pain. I've heard that he reacted strongly when he found out what happened. Can you be with a man who has acted in anger?" She answered without hesitation. "Yes, Your Honor. I believe he is sorry for what happened, and I'll never give him a reason to react that way again." "Thank you, Mrs. Wilkes." "Wilkes." He turned to Hardy. "Do you want to say something, Mr. Wilkes?" His lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client does not wish to make a statement. He wants the divorce process to continue, but to change from adultery to irreconcilable differences." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Mr. Wilkes, please stand." What comes next? He thought as he stood. "Mr. Wilkes, did you love your wife before this situation?" "Very much, Your Honor. But that doesn't mean I—" "Just answer yes or no. Do you hate her now?" "No, Your Honor, but—" "Son, my patience is running thin. Yes or no, do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Good. Is your life better without her? Remember, yes or no?" "No." "Do you miss her and what you had?" "Yes." "Now this is simple. Walk up to her. Miss Gwen, please meet him halfway. Stand in front of me." They stood facing each other. "Now, Hardy, all you need to do to finalize your divorce is look her in the eye and tell her you don't love her anymore. It should be easy if it's really over. You can speak now." 30 seconds passed, then a minute. The judge grew impatient. Finally, Hardy spoke. What does love even matter? I had a dog when I was a kid, a breed called a pit bull. It was the most beautiful dog I ever had. I raised it from a puppy and spent all my free time with it. One day, out of nowhere, it bit me hard enough to need stitches. I still have the scars. After that, it went back to acting normally, but I never trusted it again. I still loved it, but keeping my guard up was necessary. I want the divorce. Love doesn't matter. Trust is what counts. I'm afraid she might hurt me again. The judge tried to maintain his calm. This isn't the time for you to recite song lyrics. Just tell her you don't love her and we can wrap this up. Hardy stood silently. The judge's impatience grew. Go on. Tell her. We have other cases to handle. Just make it clear. Hardy opened his mouth, took a breath, but no words came out. For the first time, Gwen saw tears in his eyes. It was a mix of emotions that shook her deeply. The judge sighed. I see now. In my legal opinion, this marriage can still be saved. It is my order that you both seek marriage counseling for at least 5 sessions, and I will review the results. If after that. Hardy finally found his voice. Wait a minute, I won't. That'll be a $500 fine for interrupting and using inappropriate language in my court. There are children present. As I was saying, a minimum of 10 sessions will be... Hardy was visibly upset. If you think I'm going to tolerate this nonsense... The judge banged his gavel. Final warning. Be quiet or you'll be taken away. Your fine just increased to $1,000. Where was I? Oh yes, you need to complete at least 20 sessions with a counselor of your choice. Hardy turned around and headed toward the exit. Mr. Wilkes, come back here now. He didn't stop until he reached the door, only to find 2 bailiffs and a deputy sheriff blocking his way. The older bailiff tried to calm him down. Back off, Hardy. You might be able to take us in a fight, but we have these tasers, and I doubt you can handle all 3 of us. Now please turn around before JT gets even angrier. He already looks ready to explode, and stress isn't good for him. We're asking nicely, just go back. Hardy looked at them, and his anger faded. He turned and walked back to the judge's bench. JT waved his broken gavel at him. One more word, and you'll be in jail for disrespecting the court. Do you understand? Good. Now find a counselor, set up your appointments, and I swear if you skip one, you'll end up in jail tonight. Got it? Hardy nodded and returned to the table, whispering to his lawyer. The lawyer shook his head forcefully, then sighed. Your Honor, Mr. Wilkes wants me to repeat what he just said exactly. Remember, these are his words, not mine. May I continue? JT nodded, curious about what was coming next. Sir, he wants you to know he has lost all respect for you as a judge. This misuse of the legal system makes him embarrassed to be a lawyer. He feels that even kangaroos would be upset by what happened today. He refuses to attend so many counseling sessions and would rather go to jail now for his defiance. The lawyer seemed nervous, waiting for the judge's reaction. For a moment, Gwen thought the judge might have a health scare. He changed colors, going pale, then red, then purple. It took him a few seconds to find his words, and when he finally spoke, he almost yelled. Sir, your client is being foolish. Right now would be a great time to be taken to jail. Bailiff, take Mr. Wilkes to the county jail immediately. Mr. Wilkes, you are the most stubborn person I've ever met. Think it over for a while. I'll come see you in a couple of days to see if you've changed your mind. If not, you'll be staying with us. Do you want to apologize now? Hardy smiled. I'm sorry, JT, for almost giving you a heart scare. You really need to relax. Otherwise, who knows where I'd be. The judge was so upset he began tapping his shoe on his desk. Get him out of here, and get me a new gavel. Court is on a 20-minute break. Ms. Wilkes, could I have a moment with you in my office? You won't need your lawyer. Gwen assisted him into his office. He was still angry. Try to help someone, and this is what you get. Stubborn. Arrogant. The judge went on for a few minutes. He looked up. Sorry, I didn't think he would get this upset. Well, Judge, you did push him a bit, and he doesn't like that. Are you really going to leave him in jail? Nah. I'll let him think for a few hours, then I'll go talk to him. Maybe we can both be calmer and find a solution. Do you still want to go through with it? Yes, sir. Offer him 10 sessions to start, but let him know there might be more. Tell him he can choose the counselor. That might help. She turned to leave. Looking back, she said one last thing. I don't know what you hope to gain from this, sir, but thank you. And Judge, tell him I still care about him no matter how angry he is. Will Rob Williams, the High Sheriff of Jefferson County, was about to go to lunch. A sheriff in most southern states has a lot of power. They know the good people, the bad ones, and everyone in between. They understand who might cause trouble and keep track of the serious players. As he left his office, he noticed a prisoner being taken to the cells. He saw that the man wasn't restrained, which was against the rules. He walked over to see who was in charge of the prisoner and made a mental note to address it later. Something about this man felt familiar. Well, if it isn't Hard-Ass Wilkes, I heard you were back. I meant to catch up with you, but you know how it is too busy with work. Did someone finally catch you? He smiled widely and reached out to shake his hand. Good to see you, Will Rob. How's Myrtle? Still think she's too good for you? Yeah, but after 30 years, it doesn't seem to bother her as much. I'll tell her you asked about her. It'll make her happy. Here to see a prisoner? Hardy's smile grew even bigger. Not exactly. I am the prisoner. Shouldn't have talked back to your father-in-law, I guess. You made JT mad enough to end up here? I have to hear this. Deputy, I'm taking over from you. I'll handle it from here. Let's go eat, and you can tell me what's going on. Don't worry about JT. He'll be busy all day in court. I'll have you back in time for him to come by and brag. They spent an hour and a half at lunch catching up. The first part was light, filled with memories of past times and people they knew. The last part had a more serious tone. They briefly talked about his marriage. It's a shame about that. I know her from work. She's a great lawyer, the best in the office. Almost everyone knows you're married to her. They call her Mrs. Tough behind her back because she's so strong. Most people would rather settle than risk going to court with her. Plus, she's quite an attractive woman. You know she took the Escobar case, right? We'll keep an eye on her when the trial begins next month, but you know how it goes. Don't worry, Will Rob. I've got it under control. The sheriff frowned. It's not my place to tell a man not to watch out for his wife. I'm not asking for details, so don't share anything, okay? Just be careful. Are you prepared? Not yet. I got my permit last month. By next week, I'll have my Smith 40 with me. What Will Rob said next surprised him completely. You know she carries a 380 in her purse. She's really good at it, too. I've seen her at the range. Gwen? Guns? He had never heard her say anything about them before, but always thought she was against them. This was another new thing he learned about his wife. Reluctantly, they returned to the jail. Hardy seemed calm as the doors clanged shut. He was in a shared cell with 6 other inmates. JT came by around 6, ready to accept an apology and take him out to dinner. What he found was Hardy sitting on one side of the cell, 4 inmates sitting on the other side, and one lying on the floor, unconscious. What happened here? Hardy tried to smile despite his swollen lip. His left eye was almost shut, and there was a noticeable bump on his jaw. You know how it goes, JT? We disagreed over football. They were Auburn fans, and I shouted, "Roll Tide." In the end, I admitted they had a great season. To make it worse, did you know the jailer went to Ole Miss? He called us all names and made us discuss politics after spraying pepper spray on us. The judge shook his head. Hardy, your mouth might get you in trouble someday. Have you calmed down? Are you willing to listen to some reason and maybe negotiate a bit? His expression changed as he seemed to lower his defenses. He managed a nod. JT, as much as I enjoy being here, and I have to say the macaroni and cheese was excellent tonight, I'd rather sleep in my own bed. But if you keep talking to me like that, I'll ask what's for dessert after 20 more sessions. Don't push me again. Your little speech this morning really annoyed me. I don't recall you worrying about misusing the system when I helped keep you out of trouble when you were younger. If the recruiter hadn't been the son of my fishing buddy, you would have faced serious time instead of serving a few years for Uncle Sam. Hardy was man enough to admit he was in the wrong. Sorry, JT, I know how much I owe you and Will Rob, but it frustrates me to deal with her all the time. I just want it to be over. I promise you'll get it one way or another, but you need to speak with her to find some closure, just like the counselors say. Here's the plan. 10 sessions with a counselor of your choice. After that, I'll follow their advice. If they think it's over, then it's over. If they say you should continue, we will discuss it before I decide. This is the best you can get, so take it or enjoy your breakfast tomorrow. I hear powdered eggs are not too bad. Hardy accepted the offer. JT drove him back to his truck and told him not to waste time. He needed to have the counselor's name on his desk by next Friday. Gwen felt joyful. Hardy had agreed to 10 sessions. She already had a counselor in mind, someone from his past. This was good. He would feel more at ease and likely open up more, she hoped. He promised in an email to tell her the time for the first appointment. He still seemed to prefer email over talking in person, but she could accept that for now. As she drove into her apartment complex, she spotted a vintage Cadillac convertible, maybe from the early 70s, that looked completely restored. It was shiny and stood out. What caught her attention more was the people inside. A well-dressed young black man was behind the wheel. Next to him was a small, well-dressed, elderly white woman. As Gwen got out of her car, the young man stepped beside her. She couldn't help but admire his poise and handsome features. "Excuse me for bothering you, ma'am. Are you Mrs. Wilkes?" Feeling a bit cautious, she nodded in response. "Could you please talk to the lady in the car? She has trouble moving and is a bit shy about it. We won't take up too much of your time, I promise. She has been very eager to meet you. Just for a moment, please?" His sincerity made her say yes. The woman looked at her with curiosity as Gwen approached, finally putting on a thick pair of glasses. She beamed at her. "It's her, Marcus. I swear, if you had auburn hair, you would look just like her, don't you think?" "I agree. The similarities are remarkable." Gwen was confused. "Excuse me, but what are you talking about?" The woman gave her a look that reminded her of strict teachers from her childhood. "You, of course. Has anyone ever told you that you look a lot like your grandmother?" "You knew my grandmother? Virginia Howe?" "Child, I'm her younger sister, your great aunt. Aren't you going to invite us in? I know you were raised differently, but my goodness, you can't leave an old lady out in the sun. Marcus, help me." He looked at her with affection. "Yes, Miss Daisy. I'll get your cane now." "Marcus, stop that. It hasn't been funny for a long time." He quickly apologized. "Sorry, Aunt Daisy. Sometimes I just can't help it. It's so much fun to tease strangers. You should see the look on your face, Aunt Gwen." She slowly moved along, leaning on his arm and a cane. Once they were seated and the tea was poured, she couldn't hide her curiosity. "My great aunt, I'm so sorry, but I had no idea you were here or I would have visited sooner." Daisy waved her hand in the air. "Don't worry, dear. I'm here now. I blame your mother for this. She didn't want your father to keep in touch with us. Now look at this." She handed her an old photograph. The date on the back read 1967. It showed a young girl, maybe a teenager, with a big smile and fluffy hair, wearing a lovely dress. Gwen held it up to the light and noticed the strong resemblance. "I wish I could have known her." Daisy handed her another photo. It showed a woman in her 40s holding a young child of around 4 or 5. "That's you with her at a family reunion. You were quite lively but not mean. You followed her everywhere, and if you couldn't see your gam-gam, which was your way of saying grandma, you would get worried. She loved you very much." She sighed softly. "I wish I could remember her." "You can remember her in your heart. She was very concerned about how you would grow up, especially since she and your mother didn't get along. She never trusted her." Thinking about her mother's ways, Gwen felt her grandmother's worries were justified. "Marcus, can you please get the books?" He got up and went to the car, returning with 3 large books and a Bible. "What are those?" Daisy smiled wide. "This is the result of 50 years of research. It's your family history. You can't keep them, but Marcus has everything on the computer. When you look at it, you'll learn more than you ever thought about your family. Here, let me show you this." It was a family picture, a mother, father, son, and 2 daughters. "That's your great-grandmother and grandfather, along with your grandmother, me, and our brother Wilkes." "I have a great-uncle?" "Sadly, yes, but he passed away young in a difficult place called Korea. He never got married. You are the only grandchild left." "What about your family?" She noticed the big ring on Daisy's finger. Daisy's face turned sad. "Unfortunately, we never had children. Back then, they didn't have the tests they have now, so we never found out why. We adopted a boy who was a child of a distant cousin. Here, this is a picture of him and his family." It showed a young couple holding a newborn, their faces filled with love and hope. "He was our joy. I believe my husband loved him deeply. They were all lost in a terrible car accident, a pileup involving 23 cars during heavy fog. My husband never got over it. The old lady wiped her eyes, remembering with pain. So you see, dear, you're the last of the Howes. It's sad to see a family line end, especially one as honored as ours. Gwen felt deep sorrow for this woman. She knelt and hugged her gently. The old woman's thin shoulders shook for a moment. Daisy pushed her back softly. Look at me. I must look like a sentimental old fool, but I'm so happy to meet you. They spent 3 hours talking. Daisy enjoyed sharing the family legacy with her. She showed her a picture of a young man in a Confederate uniform. This is your great-great-great-grandfather, Alexander Howe. He was a major who survived the siege of Vicksburg. I have his journal, and it was a terrible time. There are tear stains on the page where he wrote about having to feed himself by sacrificing his horse. People suffered from hunger. He was recognized for bravery twice before the surrender. She held up another picture of a Union soldier. This is the man who accepted his surrender. His name is Gregory Stowe Canaday, and yes, you're related. He's also your great-great-great-grandfather, and your dad carries his name. Even though he was from Boston, he joined the Army of the West as an engineer. They became friends after the war, which led to your family opening a law firm here. He wanted to use his skills to help people instead of hurting them. Gwen felt overwhelmed. Wow, I went from being an only child to being related to everyone I've ever heard of. It's hard to believe I'm not related to my husband. Miss Daisy smiled. Well, actually, Alexander's sister married Francis Wesley Wilkes, your husband's great-great-great-grandfather. I need to count it up, but that makes you something like distant cousins. Gwen sat with her mouth open. Then she laughed. When she caught her breath, she said, Sorry, Aunt Daisy, but I just realized I'm a true Southern stereotype. I married my cousin. This made Marcus and Daisy laugh, and Gwen joined them again. Once the laughter faded, she asked how they gathered so much information. I studied history at Alabama and taught high school history for 40 years. I found most older details from visits, records, family Bibles, and local stories. When Marcus came along, he used his computer skills to help a lot. Here, let me show you this. It was an old family Bible. See the pages in the back filled with writing? Older Bibles often had extra pages for recording births, deaths, and major events. They serve as legal proof of birth and age. Look here. She turned to the last page. It recorded the birth of her grandmother, her father, and her. It was the final entry in the book. This is the family Bible from my father. When I'm gone, it will be yours. There are a few empty pages here. I hope you can fill them with the names of the next generation. Gwen began to cry. After a little encouragement, she shared her sad story and her fear that there might never be another entry. Daisy surprised her. Come on, cheer up. I'm not judging, but you've made some big mistakes. If you can fix them, do it. If not, move on. If you want your man back, go after him with all you've got. If you need help, ask for it. Look at how much family you can reach out to. She gestured towards the books. Gwen smiled. Thanks. I might take you up on that. Am I related to everyone in Birmingham? Child, you could close your eyes and throw a rock and you'd hit someone you're related to. She smiled in a playful way that only older people could pull off. And I'm not just talking about one group of people. Your cousin Marcus could really help you. Gwen looked back and forth between them. Okay, I need to understand. How did this happen? It turns out Alexander was involved with someone who turned out to be his great-great-grandmother. By involved, I mean he had a deep connection with her that wasn't really based on choice. Gwen covered her mouth in shock. It wasn't all bad. He cared for her enough after his wife died that he never remarried and chose to be with her instead. She stayed with him after the war by choice. She had 3 of his children, but sadly one didn't survive childbirth and another died from disease. Still, one child, his great-grandfather, lived on and raised 7 children. This came to light when Marcus came to me, researching his own family. I had the journals of both Alexander and Beth. We found a part where she seemed to accept their bond, thanking a person who helped her avoid responsibilities she felt unwell to manage. We did a DNA test and it shows we are connected. She looked proudly at Marcus. He's halfway through getting his master's in history. I'm making him my heir because he follows my path, forgives our ancestors, and is caring to an old, lonely woman. He deserves it, and after years of pushing back, he finally agreed. Gwen felt deeply touched, realizing love can appear in unexpected ways. They left after getting a promise from her to visit often. She helped Daisy to the car, listening to her complain as they walked. "I think I made a mistake giving Marcus this car. It was the first new car my husband ever bought, and I hated it then. It hadn't run in 20 years, and I didn't believe he could do anything with it. It took him 6 years, but now it looks like brand new. I would prefer to ride in my Mercedes, but if he is driving, this is all he will use." That night, Gwen settled into bed, reflecting on how important family was. She wasn't considering the many people she had helped put in jail over the past 10 months, including Vicente Escobar, Ronnie Wilkes, or Alan Hovis. But they were all thinking about her. Hey everyone! Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.